In today's world, there is a constant hum beneath the surface of our daily lives. It is the sound of stress, the pressure of never having enough time, and the feeling that no matter how much we do, it is never enough. We wake up to alarms, rush through breakfast, answer messages before we even take a breath, and already the weight of the day presses down. Some people carry this weight in their bodies as tension in the shoulders or a tightness in the chest. Others feel it as a restless mind that will not quiet down, even in the middle of the night. This is the invisible burden of modern living, and it leaves millions searching for peace in a world that never stops demanding more. It is not only the pressure of work. Money worries keep people awake long after the bills are due. Relationships, once filled with warmth, sometimes turn into battlegrounds of misunderstanding. Families grow distant, even when living under the same roof. Anxiety spreads like a silent shadow, making even the smallest choices feel overwhelming. People look at their lives and wonder why they feel so empty, even when they have achieved what society promised would bring happiness. The truth is painful. Success does not always heal loneliness. Comfort does not always end fear. And love, when fragile, can leave the deepest scars. This endless chase leaves us drained, disconnected, and uncertain of who we really are. We are told that if we just push harder, work longer, buy more, or fix ourselves faster, everything will be fine. But deep inside, we know this is not true. The harder we run, the further peace seems to slip away. And so we search. We search for meaning, for balance, for something that can ease the pain and guide us back to ourselves. For centuries, countless voices have promised solutions. Books, programs, philosophies, quick fixes. Yet none of them seem to last, because they are built on the same restless desire to control life rather than understand it. What if the answer was not to run faster, but to stop running? What if the way forward was not to add more noise, but to listen more deeply? This is where the timeless wisdom of the Buddha enters, not as dogma, not as blind belief, but as a living path of freedom. These teachings are not locked in temples or reserved for monks. They are practical truths, tested across centuries, that meet us right where we are stressed, exhausted, longing for a way out. They speak directly to the human heart, cutting through illusions and showing us a path of clarity. Through mindfulness, we learn to breathe again. Through compassion, we begin to heal. Through understanding impermanence, we release the grip of fear. And through letting go, we taste freedom that does not depend on wealth, approval, or circumstances. This journey is not about escaping life, but about finally living it fully. It is not about denying pain, but about transforming it into wisdom. It is not about seeking perfection, but about discovering the vast space of peace that has always been within us. As we walk through these teachings together, each part will open a door, from the heaviness of stress, to the wounds of money struggles, to the storms of relationships, to the restless tides of anxiety, and beyond. Our journey begins here, in the heart of suffering, because only when we face the truth of our pain can we begin to discover the boundless freedom waiting on the other side. Stress has become the silent anthem of modern society. It is everywhere, woven into the rhythm of our daily lives. People wake up with racing thoughts before the sun rises, already planning, already worrying. The calendar is full, the phone is buzzing, and the body is tired before the day has even begun. In a culture that celebrates productivity, stress is almost worn as a badge of honor, as if the more exhausted you are, the more worthy your life becomes. But behind the facade, there is a deep exhaustion, a weariness that gnaws at the spirit. Stress is no longer a passing reaction to sudden danger. It has become chronic, constant, and deeply personal. It is in the parent rushing to work while dropping off children at school, heart pounding at the thought of being late again. It is in the student drowning in assignments, feeling as though every grade determines their worth. It is in the worker staring at the computer screen late at night, wondering how long they can keep up with endless demands. It is in the quiet sighs of those who carry invisible weights, afraid to admit they are not okay. The human body is not designed to live in constant fight or flight mode, yet that is exactly what stress has forced upon us. The heart beats faster. The breath becomes shallow. Muscles tighten like coiled ropes. And beneath it all, the mind begins to fray. Thoughts spiral, jumping from one fear to another, never landing long enough to find clarity. Stress whispers lies into our ears, that we are falling behind, that we are not enough, that if we pause even for a moment, the whole world will collapse. And so we push on, ignoring the warning signs, believing that exhaustion is normal. But deep down, we know it is not. Imagine a river that never rests. Day after day, it rushes faster and faster, carrying debris along its current. Without pause, the water grows muddy, chaotic, and violent. Eventually, the river begins to erode its own banks, tearing apart the very ground that holds it. This is what happens to us when stress is left unchecked. We erode from the inside, losing our health, our joy, and even our sense of self. The body reacts with headaches, high blood pressure, weakened immunity. The mind responds with anxiety, irritability, and burnout. Relationships strain, patience dissolves, and the ability to see life clearly fades. It is tempting to think of stress as a problem caused by circumstances alone. If only the job were easier, if only the bills were paid, if only the children listened, if only the world calmed down, then we could finally relax. But the truth is more subtle. Stress does not come from the outside alone. It arises from within, from the way we meet the world, from the expectations we cling to, from the fear that we will not survive unless we control everything. Two people can face the same situation, yet one collapses under the weight of stress while the other finds calm strength. The difference is not the circumstance, but the way the mind perceives and responds. This is where the teachings of the Buddha shine with timeless clarity. Instead of promising to erase stress by changing the outer world, they guide us to transform the inner world. They remind us that life has always been uncertain, that challenges will always come, and that true peace cannot be found by rearranging circumstances. Peace arises when we shift the way we see, when we loosen the grip of fear and control, when we learn to breathe with awareness in the middle of chaos. One of the simplest yet most profound practices is mindfulness of the breath. At first, it may sound too simple, almost trivial. How could breathing, something we already do every moment, become a solution to the storms of stress? Yet when practiced with intention, it is like finding a steady anchor in turbulent waters. The next time stress rises, pause, place attention on the breath. Notice its rhythm. Inhale slowly, feeling the cool air enter. Exhale gently, feeling the warmth leave. With each cycle, the body begins to soften. The heart rate slows, and the mind, which was racing like a wild horse, begins to settle. The world outside does not change, but inside, a spaciousness opens. Stress loses its grip, not because the problems vanished, but because you discovered the power to meet them with calm awareness. Mindfulness is not about escaping life. It is about entering it fully. When stress tells you to rush, mindfulness invites you to slow down. When stress demands perfection, mindfulness whispers that this moment, just as it is enough. When stress convinces you that you are alone, mindfulness reveals that every breath connects you to all living beings who are breathing alongside you in this very moment. There is great comfort in remembering that stress is not your personal failure. It is a shared human experience, and awareness is the medicine that transforms it. Beyond the breath, the teachings also speak of letting go. Much of our stress comes not from what is happening, but from what we refuse to release. We cling to control, to outcomes, to the idea that life must unfold exactly as we demand. But life has never belonged to us in that way. Trying to control, it is like trying to hold water in our fists. The tighter we squeeze, the more it slips away, leaving us exhausted and empty-handed. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means opening the hand, allowing life to flow, trusting that we can meet it moment by moment. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, deadlines are no longer prisons, but opportunities to focus. Arguments are no longer wars to win, but invitations to listen. Unexpected changes are no longer threats, but reminders of life's fluid nature. Asterisk compassion is another key. Stress often isolates us, making us feel trapped in our own struggles. But when we turn toward compassion, for ourselves and for others, stress softens. Compassion is the gentle voice that says, "It is okay to be tired. It is okay to not have it all figured out. You are human." When we offer this kindness inward, the harsh inner critic that fuels stress begins to quiet. And when we extend compassion outward, we recognize that others, too, are carrying invisible burdens. This recognition builds connection, dissolves isolation, and lightens the load. Consider the story of a man who carried a heavy sack everywhere he went. Inside were stones, each representing a worry, a regret, a fear. The sack grew heavier with each passing day. He never questioned it. He simply believed it was his duty to carry it. But one day, exhausted, he sat down and opened the sack. To his surprise, some of the stones were not even his. They were fears he had inherited from others, expectations he had adopted without reflection, burdens he had chosen without realizing. Gently, he began to remove the unnecessary stones, one by one. With each release, the sack grew lighter, and his steps became freer. Stress works in the same way. We carry so much that is not truly ours. Through mindfulness, compassion, and letting go, we learn to set down the stones that never belonged to us, and in doing so, we discover a new lightness in life. The Buddha once described stress and suffering as arrows. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life loss, illness, change. But the second arrow is the one we shoot ourselves, the arrow of resistance, fear, and overthinking. Stress is often that second arrow. We cannot always stop the first, but we can choose not to add the second. With awareness, we pause before reacting, we breathe before tightening, we soften instead of resisting. And in that pause, freedom begins. When we realize that stress is not our enemy, but our teacher, everything changes. Stress reveals where we cling too tightly. It shows us where we are afraid, where we have forgotten to trust, where we are out of balance. If we meet it with mindfulness and compassion, stress itself becomes the gateway to deeper peace. It becomes the reminder to return to the breath, to return to kindness, to return to the present moment. And so, as we continue this journey, we begin to see that stress, as heavy as it feels, does not have to define us. It is not a life sentence. It is a call to awaken. It is the signal that invites us to look inward, to rediscover the calm that is always waiting within. The first step has been taken, but the path continues, leading us deeper into understanding, into freedom, and into a way of living that no longer bows to the tyranny of stress. Stress often hides behind ordinary faces. A teacher standing before, her student smiles warmly, but inside, her heart beats with the fear of failing them. A nurse cares for patients with steady hands, but when she returns home, her body shakes from fatigue and tears come without warning. A father plays with his children, laughing out loud, but his mind is tangled with thoughts of bills and debts. A young man scrolls through his phone late at night, comparing himself to others, feeling smaller with every post he sees. Stress is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, showing up as numbness, as an inability to feel joy even in the middle of life's blessings. Sometimes it takes the form of irritability, snapping at loved ones without knowing why. Sometimes it simply steals the sparkle from the eyes. We often treat stress as a private battle, ashamed to admit we are struggling. In a culture that prizes resilience and self-reliance, asking for help can feel like weakness. Yet this silence only feeds the fire. What we refuse to acknowledge grows stronger. Stress thrives in the shadows of secrecy, convincing us we are alone, that no one else could understand. But the truth is the opposite. Stress is universal. Every person carries it in some form. The Buddha himself spoke of suffering as the common ground of humanity. To suffer is not to fail. It is to be human. And when we recognize this, shame begins to fall away. Imagine sitting in a circle where each person places their burdens in the center. At first, you might think your load is heavier than anyone else's. But as you listen to others, you realize they too carry worries, fears, regrets. In that moment, a shift occurs. The burden does not disappear, but it feels lighter, because you are no longer carrying it alone. This is the power of connection, and it is one of the first antidotes to stress. When we share, when we open up, when we allow ourselves to be seen, the invisible weight begins to lift. Buddhist wisdom teaches that all things are impermanent, including stress. When you are in the middle of it, stress feels permanent, as if it will last forever. But nothing does. Just as storms pass, so too does stress, if we do not cling to it. The problem is that most of us do cling. We replay stressful events in our minds, again and again, long after they have ended. We carry conversations that happened years ago. We imagine disasters that have not yet come. In doing so, we keep stress alive long past its natural life. The practice of impermanence invites us to see stress for what it truly is, temporary. It arises, it lingers, and it passes. When we hold this truth close, we loosen its power. One practice that helps is labeling. When a stressful thought appears, instead of becoming it, we can gently name it: worry, fear, planning. By labeling, we create distance. The thought is no longer who we are. It is something we are observing. This shift, though small, is profound. Suddenly, the thought loses its grip. It is just a passing cloud in the vast sky of the mind. We are the sky, not the cloud. Another teaching points us toward right effort. Stress often comes from struggling against what is. We spend enormous energy resisting reality, wishing things were different. Right effort is not about forcing or controlling. It is about choosing wisely where we place our energy. Instead of pouring effort into endless worry, we redirect it toward clarity, kindness, and balance. For example, when overwhelmed by tasks, right effort may mean choosing one simple step instead of drowning in the whole picture. When pulled into negative self-talk, right effort may mean replacing it with a single phrase of kindness. These small shifts accumulate, reducing stress not by changing the world, but by changing how we engage with it. Consider a woman who spent years trying to control every detail of her life. Her days were filled with lists, her nights with planning. Stress consumed her. One day, she came across a teaching: let go or be dragged. At first, she resisted, afraid that letting go meant losing everything. But slowly, she began to release small things, the need for everyone's approval, the obsession with perfection. Each release brought a wave of relief. She discovered that the world did not collapse when she let go. Instead, she felt lighter, freer, more alive. This is the paradox of letting go. What we fear will destroy us often becomes the key to our freedom. The Buddha also spoke of the middle path. Stress often arises from extremes. We push ourselves too hard, or we avoid responsibilities altogether. We overwork, then collapse. We swing between control and chaos. The middle path is the balance between these extremes. It is steady, gentle, sustainable. It reminds us that life is not a sprint, but a journey. When we walk this path, stress loses its sharp edges. We begin to live with more ease, more rhythm, more flow. Compassion, once again, plays a central role. Stress is often fueled by self-criticism. We tell ourselves we should be stronger, better, calmer. But harshness never soothes stress. Only kindness does. When we place a hand on the heart and whisper, "It's okay. I am doing my best," we begin to dissolve the tension. Compassion does not remove the challenges, but it changes the way we hold them. And that makes all the difference. There is also a practice known as loving kindness meditation. It begins by offering simple phrases of goodwill to oneself. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. At first, it may feel awkward, even forced, but with repetition, something shifts. The heart softens, the inner critic quiets, and stress, which thrives on harshness, begins to weaken. Over time, this practice extends outward to friends, to strangers, even to those we struggle with. And as compassion expands, stress contracts. Stories from the Buddhist tradition illustrate these truths. One tells of a monk who carried water each day in 2 buckets. One bucket was whole, the other cracked, leaking water along the path. For years, the monk felt frustrated, believing the cracked bucket was a burden. But one day, he noticed flowers blooming along the path where the water had spilled. The crack, once seen as a flaw, had become a source of beauty. Stress often feels like a crack in our lives. But when seen with wisdom, it becomes the very place where growth and compassion can bloom. In the end, stress is not something to be eradicated, but something to be transformed. It is the fire that, when held wisely, forges resilience, compassion, and clarity. It is the teacher that reveals our attachments, our fears, our illusions. And when we meet it with mindfulness, compassion, and letting go, stress no longer defines us. Instead, it refines us. As we close this first part of our journey, let us carry with us a new understanding. Stress is real? Yes. It is heavy? Yes. But it is also impermanent, workable, and transformable. It does not have to crush us. It can guide us back to the breath, back to the present, back to the truth that peace is always within reach. And as we step forward, we will turn from stress to another weight that presses deeply on modern hearts. The endless struggle with money and survival, the belief that our worth is tied to wealth, and the suffering that arises from this illusion. Just as stress is not the enemy, neither is money. The question is not how to escape it, but how to meet it with wisdom, with freedom, and with a heart that is no longer enslaved by fear. Money shapes so much of modern life. It is the silent thread running through our days, influencing where we live, what we eat, how we feel about ourselves, and even how we treat others. For many, money is not just paper or numbers in an account. It is survival. It is safety. It is the key to dignity in a world that measures worth in dollars and possessions. And because of this, money has become one of the greatest sources of stress, conflict, and suffering. People wake up each morning already thinking about bills. Rent, mortgage, student loans, car payments, medical expenses. The list never ends. Families argue late into the night about finances. Couples who once dreamed of building a life together find themselves divided by resentment when money is scarce. Parents work long hours, missing their children's milestones, believing they have no choice. Children grow up sensing the tension, even when no one speaks of it, inheriting the same fears about scarcity and worth. The weight of money anxiety often presses hardest on those who already feel vulnerable. A single mother balancing 2 jobs and still falling short. An elderly man watching his savings drain away, unsure how long he can remain independent. a young graduate drowning in debt before their career has even begun. These stories are countless, and each one carries the same undertone: fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of losing what little there is. Fear of being judged or left behind. Modern culture fuels this fear by telling us that money is not only necessary, but is also the measure of success. Advertisements scream that happiness comes with the latest product. Social media floods us with curated images of wealth and comfort. Society whispers that without financial security, life is incomplete, and that without material success, we are failures. These voices are powerful. They sink deep into the mind, shaping beliefs that are hard to shake. And yet, even for those who appear to have enough, the suffering does not always end. Many wealthy people live in constant fear of losing what they have, or in dissatisfaction because it is never enough. The mansion is not big enough. The account is not full enough. The comparison to others never stops. The chase for more becomes endless. The truth is painful. Money alone cannot give lasting peace. It can solve certain problems, yes. It can ease survival, yes. But it cannot fill the emptiness of the heart. It cannot heal loneliness, mend broken relationships, or quiet the restless mind. This is where Buddhist wisdom offers a different perspective. The Buddha did not deny the reality of survival. Food, shelter, clothing, medicine, these are basic needs, and money helps meet them. But he also taught that attachment to wealth and the illusion that it can solve all suffering is a trap. He described craving as a fire, always demanding more fuel, never satisfied. No matter how much is poured in, the fire only grows. And so, the cycle of desire and disappointment continues, binding us to endless striving. To break free, the teachings invite us to look at money not as enemy or savior, but as tool. A tool can be used skillfully or unskillfully. In unskillful hands, money fuels greed, competition, and despair. In skillful hands, money becomes a means of support, generosity, and balance. The difference lies not in the amount, but in the mind that uses it. Consider a person who has very little, but uses what they have to feed a hungry neighbor. Their heart expands. Stress softens. Peace grows. Now consider someone who has millions, but clings tightly, constantly fearing loss. Their wealth becomes a prison. Which one is richer in spirit? Which one knows freedom? The answer is clear. One of the most powerful practices for transforming our relationship with money is gratitude. Instead of focusing endlessly on what is lacking, we pause to see what is already here. A simple meal, a roof overhead, a moment of safety. Gratitude shifts the mind from scarcity to sufficiency. It does not erase challenges, but it softens the panic. It reminds us that life, even in its difficulties, still offers countless blessings. Generosity is another practice. When we give even a little, we break the grip of fear. Generosity does not require great wealth. It can be a kind word, a helping hand, a small gift offered with sincerity. Each act of giving loosens the chain of attachment. Each act of giving reminds us that abundance is not measured by what we hold, but by what we share. There is also the practice of contentment. In a world that constantly tells us we need more, contentment is revolutionary. It is the quiet voice that says, "What I have is enough for this moment." Contentment does not mean laziness or lack of ambition. It means seeing clearly what matters and releasing the endless chase for more. When contentment grows, money loses its power to dominate our peace. Buddhist stories often illustrate these truths. One tells of a king who had everything: wealth, power, luxury. Yet he was restless, never satisfied. Beside him lived a poor farmer who sang joyfully each morning while working in the fields. Curious, the king asked why the farmer was so happy with so little. The farmer replied, I eat when I am hungry, I sleep when I am tired, and I love those around me. What more could I need? The king realized that despite his riches, he had lost the simple peace that comes from contentment. In another story, the Buddha spoke of the danger of clinging to wealth. He compared it to carrying a torch against the wind. The tighter you hold, the more likely you are to burn yourself. Letting go does not mean rejecting money altogether. It means not letting money define who you are or dictate the state of your heart. When we see money clearly, without illusion, we begin to live differently. Work becomes less about endless chasing and more about meaningful contribution. Success shifts from accumulation to service. Security is found not only in numbers, but in trust, community, and inner peace. And slowly, the fear that once dominated begins to dissolve. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires daily practice, daily awareness. Each time fear of scarcity arises, we pause, breathe, and ask, what is truly needed right now? What is illusion? What can I release? Each time desire pushes us toward endless consumption, we pause and ask, will this bring lasting peace or just momentary distraction? These small questions guide us back to balance. And as we live with greater balance, we discover a surprising truth. The freedom we seek was never in the numbers. It was in the mind and heart all along. As we continue this exploration, the story of money is not complete without seeing how deeply it entangles with our closest bonds. Relationships often carry the wounds of financial struggle. Stress about survival spills into arguments, resentment, and silence. Money becomes not just numbers, but the symbol of love, security, and control. To heal fully, we must step into this space as well, where the pain of money and the pain of connection merge. Money, for many, is not just about paying for food or shelter. It becomes tangled with identity. We are taught to believe that our value as human beings is measured by what we own, how much we earn, and what we can display to the world. The car, the house, the clothes, the vacations, these become symbols of worth. Without them, people fear they are invisible, unimportant, or even unlovable. This is why financial loss feels so devastating. It is not only the loss of comfort, but the illusion of identity. When money is tied to self-worth, even small setbacks can cut deeply. A failed investment, a lost job, a debt that lingers, these are felt not just in the bank, but in the soul. Couples know this pain well. Surveys often show that money is one of the leading causes of conflict in marriage. Beneath the surface arguments about spending or saving lies something deeper: fear of survival, fear of instability, fear of betrayal. One partner feels abandoned when the other spends carelessly. The other feels trapped when told to restrict. In these moments, money is no longer just numbers. It becomes a battlefield for love, trust, and security. And when words turn harsh, wounds are left that money itself can never heal. Families, too, inherit these patterns. Children absorb the stress of financial tension, even when parents try to hide it. A slammed door, a hushed argument, a sigh at the kitchen table, these speak louder than balance sheets. Children grow up carrying the same fears, repeating the same patterns. Scarcity thinking passes from one generation to the next, like an invisible inheritance. Even friendships are shaped by money. Invitations to dinners or trips bring joy, but they also bring quiet shame for those who cannot afford to participate. People pull away, not because they do not care, but because they feel less than unable to keep up. Social circles fracture, and loneliness grows, all because of an illusion. That money decides who belongs and who does not. At its core, the suffering tied to money comes down to attachment and aversion, the craving for more and the fear of less. This cycle fuels endless dissatisfaction. The Buddha described it clearly. Desire leads to suffering, not because desire itself is evil, but because when unchecked, it never ends. The moment one craving is satisfied, another arises. The new phone, the larger house, the higher salary all bring a flash of happiness, followed by the hunger for more. This endless chase is the very definition of restlessness. So how do we break free? The teachings point us back, again and again, to the mind. The outer circumstances may not change quickly. Bills still arrive. Work still demands. But our relationship to money, our story about it, can transform. This is where the practice of mindfulness becomes vital. When we pause to notice how money shapes our emotions, we begin to loosen its control. We see how the sight of a bill sparks fear, how the thought of comparison triggers envy, how the dream of wealth feeds desire. With awareness, we no longer run on autopilot. We step back and observe. This observation is powerful. It creates a space between stimulus and reaction, between thought and action. In that space, freedom begins. The practice of right livelihood is also essential. The Buddha taught that how we earn matters as much as what we earn. When work is aligned with ethics, when it does not harm others, it brings peace of mind regardless of the paycheck. But when work violates values, even great wealth cannot soothe the conscience. Right livelihood reminds us that money gained at the cost of integrity carries hidden suffering. Choosing work that supports life, that honors compassion, that aligns with truth, this is a wealth deeper than numbers. Generosity, too, is emphasized again and again. The act of giving is like loosening a tight fist. Each time we give, fear loosens, greed loosens, and the illusion of control loosens. Generosity is not measured by the size of the gift, but by the sincerity of the heart. A poor woman offering half her meal to someone hungrier than herself may embody greater wealth of spirit than a billionaire writing a check without feeling. The joy of giving ripples outward, touching both giver and receiver, creating a freedom that money alone cannot buy. Contentment, as mentioned before, becomes a shield against the endless chase. It is not about denying ambition or refusing to grow. It is about knowing when enough is enough. Imagine a man who eats and eats, never satisfied, always hungry for more. His life is filled with food, yet his heart is empty. Now imagine another who eats just enough to nourish the body, then rests with gratitude. Who is richer? Contentment teaches us that true abundance is not the accumulation of things, but the ability to rest with peace in what we already have. There is also a profound practice known as equanimity. It is the ability to remain steady in the face of both gain and loss. Life will always bring changes, unexpected windfalls, sudden losses. Without equanimity, we are tossed around like a leaf in the wind. With equanimity, we remain grounded, meeting both fortune and misfortune with balance. This balance does not erase emotion, but it prevents us from being enslaved by it. Imagine standing on the shore as waves crash. One wave brings treasure, another takes it away. If we chase the treasure or fight the loss, we are dragged into the sea. But if we stand steady, watching the waves come and go, we remain free. Equanimity is this steady ground. This wisdom that knows money is just another wave. It comes, it goes. It is never who we truly are. The Buddha himself once lived in great luxury before renouncing it. He knew firsthand the pleasures and the traps of wealth. His teachings do not reject money outright, but place it in its proper place. Survival matters. Comfort has its role. But when wealth becomes the measure of the heart, suffering follows. Freedom is found not in rejecting money, nor in worshiping it, but in walking the middle path, using it wisely, without attachment, without fear. When we integrate these practices, mindfulness, right livelihood, generosity, contentment, equanimity, we begin to reclaim power over money instead of being controlled by it. We begin to see that our worth was never tied to numbers. Our value is innate, unshaken by gain or loss. This realization is liberating. It allows us to breathe again, to love again, to live without the constant weight of financial fear. And so, as we bring part 2 to a close, we stand at a threshold. We have faced the pain of stress. We have faced the pain of money and survival. But suffering wears many masks, and one of the deepest appears in the realm of relationships. Love, family, friendship. These are the sources of our greatest joy and also of our greatest pain. When bonds break, when trust shatters, when loneliness creeps in, the heart aches in ways money cannot touch. It is here, in the tender space of human connection, that we turn next. Relationships are the beating heart of human life. From the moment we are born, we reach out for touch, for warmth, for connection. We are shaped by the bonds we form with parents, with friends, with partners, with children. These connections can bring deep joy, a sense of belonging, and moments of profound meaning. And yet, the same connections can also bring some of our sharpest pain. When relationships falter, when trust is broken, when loneliness takes root even in the presence of others, the suffering cuts straight into the core of who we are. Modern life has made relationships both more accessible and more fragile. Technology allows us to connect instantly across continents, yet many confess to feeling more isolated than ever. A family may sit together in one room, each staring at their own screen, barely exchanging a word. Friends may communicate through text messages and emojis, but months pass without a real conversation. Couples may share a house, but not their hearts. In this strange paradox, we are surrounded by people, yet starved of true connection. The pain of broken or strained relationships shows up in countless forms. A marriage once filled with laughter now echoes with silence, each partner retreating into separate worlds. Parents and children clash, the generation gap widening into a canyon of misunderstanding. Friendships fade under the weight of unspoken resentment or neglected time. Even within ourselves, we experience a fracture, the longing for closeness and the fear of being hurt again. This dual pull creates tension. We crave intimacy, but we guard our hearts. At the root of much relationship suffering lies attachment. We enter relationships with unspoken expectations that others will complete us, that they will behave as we wish, that they will remain unchanged. When reality diverges from these expectations, as it inevitably does, pain follows. A partner forgets to listen, a friend drifts away, a family member criticizes, and we feel betrayed. Yet often, the suffering comes not only from what was done, but from our inability to release the picture of how things should have been. We cling to a story, and the tighter we hold, the more the heart aches. This clinging also shows up as control. We want loved ones to act a certain way, to fulfill our needs perfectly, to never disappoint us. But people are not possessions. They are living, breathing beings with their own fears, desires, and wounds. When we try to mold them into our image of perfection, we inevitably clash. Arguments arise, distance grows, love hardens into demand. Instead of seeing the person before us, we see only the shadow of our expectations. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving and attachment, and nowhere is this more visible than in relationships. But the teachings also reveal a path to freedom, the cultivation of love without clinging, of compassion without control. This kind of love is not about possession, but about presence. It is not about demanding, but about offering. It is not about filling our emptiness with another person, but about recognizing the fullness already within us and sharing it freely. To understand this, imagine holding a bird in your hand. If you grip too tightly, you harm it. If you open your hand too much, it flies away. True care is a balance, holding gently, supporting without crushing, allowing freedom without abandonment. Relationships are like this. They flourish not when bound by chains, But when nurtured with trust, respect, and spaciousness.yet, love in its healthiest form often feels elusive. Many of us carry wounds from childhood, shaping the way we give and receive affection. A child who grew up feeling unseen may become an adult constantly seeking validation, draining relationships with endless need. Another who grew up in conflict may fear intimacy, keeping walls high to avoid pain. These unconscious patterns repeat again and again, leaving us wondering why love always seems to hurt. This is where mindfulness becomes a powerful tool. By observing our reactions in relationships, the irritation when a partner forgets, the jealousy when a friend succeeds, the fear when intimacy deepens, we begin to see our patterns clearly. These reactions are not random. They are echoes of old wounds. Mindfulness allows us to pause and ask, what am I really feeling? Where does this come from? What does my heart truly need? In this pause, awareness replaces reactivity and compassion begins to grow. The practice of loving kindness meditation also transforms relationships. By silently repeating phrases such as, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be free from suffering, we begin to soften the walls around our hearts. At first, it may feel awkward to send these wishes to someone who has hurt us. But over time, the practice reveals a deeper truth. Love is not about deserving. Love is a natural state of the heart, waiting to be uncovered. When we practice loving kindness, we are not excusing harmful behavior. We are freeing ourselves from the poison of hatred and resentment. Compassion, too, plays a vital role. When a partner snaps in anger, compassion allows us to see the fear or pain beneath the outburst. When a friend withdraws, compassion reminds us that they may be struggling with unseen burdens. Compassion does not mean tolerating abuse or abandoning boundaries. It means seeing the humanity in others, even when they falter. This shift changes the atmosphere of relationships. Instead of battles, there is understanding. Instead of walls, there are bridges. Forgiveness is another doorway to freedom. Carrying resentment is like carrying a burning coal, hoping it will hurt the other person. In truth, it only burns us. Forgiveness does not erase the past or condone harm. It releases us from the chains of bitterness. It allows us to move forward without dragging the weight of old wounds. This release creates space for healing, sometimes together, sometimes apart, but always within. One story tells of a monk who carried a woman across a river. Hours later, his companion rebuked him, saying monks should not touch women. The monk replied, I set her down by the river. Why are you still carrying her? In relationships, we often carry the past long after the moment has passed. We replay arguments, relive betrayals, rehearse hurts. Forgiveness is the act of setting them down. As we walk this path, we begin to see that love rooted in attachment brings suffering, but love rooted in freedom brings peace. This is not a cold detachment, but a warm, spacious love that says, I care for you, but I do not need to control you. I love you, but my happiness does not depend entirely on you. I wish you well, even if our paths diverge. This love is fearless because it is not dependent on conditions. It flows naturally, like sunlight, warming whatever it touches without demand. Relationships, though often the source of great suffering, can also become the greatest teachers. They reveal our attachments, our expectations, our wounds. And when met with mindfulness, compassion, and forgiveness, they reveal our capacity for boundless love. As we continue this journey, we will look even deeper into the layers of the human heart. Because beneath the struggles of stress, money, and relationships, there is another shadow that haunts many lives: anxiety, a constant undercurrent of fear, restlessness, and uncertainty. To step into that space, we must first understand its roots, its disguises, and the way it grips the modern mind. Love, in its purest form, is a gift. Yet for many, love feels like a battlefield. We long for closeness, but often what we find is conflict, misunderstanding, or disappointment. Lovers who once whispered promises of forever find themselves shouting or retreating into silence. Parents who only wish to protect and guide find their children pulling away, rejecting their care. Friends who once shared everything now drift into distance, unsure how to reconnect. These fractures leave us questioning not only the relationship, but ourselves. Am I lovable? Am I enough? Why does love hurt so much? The truth is that love hurts most when it is confused with possession. We often say, my partner, my child, my friend, as if the person belongs to us. With that belief comes expectation, demand, and control. But people are not objects. They are rivers, always flowing, always changing. To hold them too tightly is to suffer, because rivers cannot be frozen. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, and this includes people, their moods, their roles, and even their presence in our lives. To love without recognizing impermanence is to guarantee heartbreak. But to love with awareness of change is to savor the preciousness of each moment. This does not mean detaching coldly, as if people do not matter. It means cherishing them deeply, without clinging to illusions of permanence. It means saying, I love you now fully, knowing this moment will pass. It means being grateful for the laughter shared today, even if tomorrow brings distance. In this way, love becomes less about ownership and more about appreciation. Consider the story of a mother who watched her child leave home for the first time. Her heart ached with emptiness, and she feared she had lost her purpose. But over time, she realized that love had not ended. It had simply transformed. It was no longer expressed through daily care, but through quiet support, through prayers, through the joy of seeing her child walk their own path. Love, she discovered, is not bound by form. It adapts, it shifts, it continues in relationships. Much suffering also comes from unspoken wounds carried into the present. A person who once felt abandoned may fear rejection in every partnership. A person who once felt criticized may hear judgment even in gentle feedback. These wounds color perception, turning innocent actions into perceived threats. Unless brought into awareness, these patterns repeat endlessly. Mindfulness offers a way to break the cycle. When we pause and recognize, this pain is old, this fear is from the past, we begin to separate memory from reality. We respond to the present, not to the ghosts of yesterday. Compassion, again, becomes a bridge. Just as we carry wounds, so do others. A partner's anger may mask their fear. A friend's withdrawal may hide their shame. A parent's criticism may reveal their own unresolved pain. Compassion does not excuse harmful behavior, but it allows us to see more clearly, to soften the judgment that fuels conflict. When two people meet with compassion, healing becomes possible. Even if the relationship cannot continue, understanding brings peace. Forgiveness is perhaps the hardest, yet most liberating, practice in relationships. Many resist forgiveness, believing it means condoning harm. But forgiveness is not for the other person alone. It is for ourselves. Carrying resentment poisons our own heart. It keeps us bound to the past, unable to move forward. Forgiveness is the act of releasing that chain. It does not erase memory or justice, but it opens the door to freedom. The Buddha described anger as holding a hot coal with the intent to throw it at another, yet burning oneself most of all. Forgiveness is the choice to drop the coal dot. There is also the practice of deep listening. So often, in relationships, we listen only to respond, to defend, to argue. Rarely do we listen to understand. Deep listening requires silence, patience, and openness. It means setting aside judgment and truly hearing the pain, fear, or longing beneath the words. When someone feels heard, even without agreement, much of their suffering softens. In that space, connection is restored. Equally important is learning to speak with honesty and kindness. Words are powerful. They can wound deeply, or they can heal. In the heat of conflict, harsh words may feel justified, but their scars linger. Mindful speech is the practice of speaking truth without cruelty, of expressing needs without blame, of using words as bridges rather than weapons. This practice transforms not only relationships, but the very atmosphere of the home. Boundaries, too, are an expression of wisdom and love. Compassion does not mean allowing harm. Forgiveness does not mean staying in situations of abuse. Boundaries are the lines that protect dignity, safety, and respect. They are not walls of rejection, but gates of clarity. They say, "I love you, and because I love myself too, I cannot allow harm." Boundaries, when set with calm firmness, create healthier space for relationships to thrive. The practice of loving kindness extends even to those we struggle with. It may seem impossible to send goodwill to someone who hurt us, but over time, this practice softens the grip of hatred. It reminds us that beneath layers of harm, every being seeks happiness, every being fears suffering. This recognition does not erase accountability, but it restores our humanity, preventing us from becoming consumed by bitterness. One parable tells of two monks walking through a forest. One carried anger for a betrayal he had suffered years ago. The other asked, "Why do you still carry this burden?" The first replied, "Because I cannot let go." The second monk said, "Then you are choosing to carry not only your own suffering, but the suffering of the one who hurt you. Why give them that power?" Relationships invite us to ask this same question. Are we carrying pain longer than we need to? Can we set it down? Ultimately, relationships reveal a profound truth. We cannot control others, but we can transform ourselves. When we approach love with mindfulness, compassion, forgiveness, and boundaries, we create the conditions for peace. The other may or may not change, but our own heart becomes free. And in that freedom, love becomes what it was always meant to be, a source of joy, not bondage. As part 3 comes to a close, we see that relationships, though fraught with challenges, are also sacred teachers. They mirror our attachments, our fears, and our capacity for growth. They call us to deeper awareness, to greater compassion, to a love that is boundless rather than possessive. Yet beneath the pain of stress, money, and relationships lies another current that runs through countless lives: anxiety, a restless unease, a constant questioning, a mind that races ahead into what might go wrong. Anxiety robs people of sleep, of presence, of peace. To face it, we must turn next not with avoidance, but with courage, clarity, and the gentle wisdom of the Buddhist path. Anxiety has become the constant background noise of modern life. It hums quietly in the mind, sometimes as a whisper, sometimes as a roar, never letting us fully rest. For some, it appears as a racing heart before a big meeting. For others, it is the tightness in the chest while lying awake at night, the mind spinning through endless possibilities of what might go wrong. Anxiety is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle, showing up as a vague unease that lingers throughout the day, a shadow that never leaves. It is the knowing sense that something is wrong, even when everything appears fine on the surface. Unlike stress, which often has a clear trigger, a deadline, a conflict, a bill, anxiety can feel more elusive. It is a fear without a name, a worry without a clear object. You may sit in a quiet room, nothing pressing, yet the mind churns with dread. You may laugh with friends, yet in the back of your mind, a storm brews. Anxiety does not always ask permission. It seeps in uninvited, coloring every experience. The toll is heavy. Anxiety drains energy, scatters focus, and erodes joy. It turns simple decisions into monumental struggles. Should I send this message? Should I take that opportunity? What if I fail? What if they reject me? The endless what-ifs pile up until even the smallest choice feels overwhelming. And beneath it all lies fear, the fear of making a mistake, of being judged, of losing control, of facing the unknown. Our culture, in many ways, feeds this anxiety. We live in an age of constant comparison. Social media shows us curated lives, flawless images, endless success stories. And while the logical mind may know these are illusions, the emotional mind still reacts, whispering, "Why not me? Why am I not enough?" News cycles amplify fear with stories of danger and uncertainty, convincing us that disaster is always near. The fast pace of modern life leaves little room for stillness, pushing us to run faster, achieve more, and never pause. In this environment, anxiety finds fertile soil. Anxiety is not new. The Buddha spoke of the restless mind over 2,500 years ago. He described it as a monkey, leaping from branch to branch, never still. Today, that monkey mind is turbocharged by technology, deadlines, and endless noise. But the root remains the same, the inability to rest in the present moment. Anxiety lives in the future, in imagined scenarios of what might go wrong. It drags us away from the here and now, chaining us to a world of fear that does not even exist yet. The teachings of the Buddha offer a profound antidote. They do not promise a life free from uncertainty. Such a life does not exist. Instead, they guide us to face uncertainty with awareness and calm. The first step is recognition. To say gently, "This is anxiety. This is what it feels like in the body. This is how it moves in the mind." Instead of fighting or fleeing, we turn toward it with curiosity. What happens when anxiety arises? Where does it sit in the body? How does it shift? By observing, we create space between ourselves and the fear. Anxiety is no longer the master. It becomes the object of awareness. NDFULNESS of the body is especially powerful here. When the mind spins into anxious thoughts, the body anchors us. Feeling the ground beneath the feet, noticing the rise and fall of the breath, placing a hand on the heart. These simple acts remind us that in this moment, right now, we are safe. Anxiety screams about tomorrow, but the body whispers about now. And now, in this very breath, there is enough. Another practice is the use of mantras or phrases to calm the mind. Repeating slowly, "I am safe in this moment," or "This is only a thought, not reality," can help redirect the spiral. The Buddha himself encouraged the use of simple phrases that remind the mind of truth. Over time, these words become like lanterns in the dark, guiding us back when anxiety tries to pull us away. It is also essential to understand the role of impermanence. Anxiety feels endless, as if it will last forever. But like all experiences, it arises and it passes. No storm, no matter how fierce, lasts forever. When anxiety is seen through this lens, it loses some of its power. You may say to yourself, "This is a wave. It is strong, but it will pass." By riding the wave instead of resisting it, you discover resilience. Compassion must also enter the picture. Anxiety often comes with shame. People judge themselves harshly. "Why can't I just relax? Why am I so weak? Why can't I be normal?" This self-criticism only fuels the fire. Compassion invites us to treat ourselves as we would a dear friend. To say, "It's okay. I see you are scared. I am here for you." With compassion, the inner war softens. Anxiety is no longer an enemy to defeat, but a wounded part of ourselves longing to be soothed. Consider a man who carried anxiety for years, hiding it from everyone. He believed admitting it would make him seem weak. But the more he resisted, the stronger it grew. Finally, he began to practice sitting quietly, breathing, and simply naming his fear. "Hello, anxiety. I see you." To his surprise, the moment he stopped fighting, the anxiety began to soften. By making peace with it, he reclaimed his power. There is also the teaching of non-self, or the understanding that we are not defined by any single emotion. Anxiety says, "You are your fear," but the truth is different. You are the awareness in which fear arises and passes. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. This perspective is liberating. Suddenly, anxiety is just one experience among many, not the definition of who you are. Still, the path is not about eliminating anxiety completely. It is about transforming our relationship with it. Anxiety may still arise, but it no longer controls us. It becomes a messenger, a signal that we are clinging too tightly to certainty, that we are resisting the unknown. Instead of collapsing under it, we listen, we breathe, and we release. One parable tells of a man chased by a wild animal. He runs and runs until he comes to a cliff. Hanging by a vine, he looks down to see danger below as well. At that moment, he notices a strawberry growing near him. He reaches out, plucks it, and tastes its sweetness. Despite fear on all sides, he discovers joy in the present moment. Anxiety may surround us, but peace is always available now, if we pause to notice Dot. And so, as we begin this journey into anxiety, we see that it is not a personal failing, but a universal human experience. It is the mind's reaction to uncertainty, to impermanence, to the illusion of control. By meeting it with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we transform it from prison into teacher. This is only the beginning. As we go deeper, we will uncover the layers of anxiety, how it feeds on thought, how it disguises itself as control, how it can be softened through practices of awareness and letting go. We will see that beneath the restless waves lies a vast stillness, waiting to be discovered. Anxiety often disguises itself as control. The mind whispers, "If I can plan enough, if I can prepare for every outcome, if I can hold on tightly, I will be safe." And so we overthink, replay conversations, predict disasters, rehearse what might never come. At first, this illusion of control feels comforting, but soon it becomes a cage. Instead of preventing anxiety, it feeds it. The more we try to control life, the more we discover its unpredictability. Plans change, people act in unexpected ways, events unfold beyond our grasp. And each time reality diverges from our script, anxiety surges again. The Buddha described this cycle clearly. Craving and clinging create suffering. In the case of anxiety, the craving is for certainty, and the clinging is to control. But life is inherently uncertain. To cling to certainty in an uncertain world is to set ourselves up for endless fear. The path to freedom lies not in greater control, but in greater trust in ourselves, in the flow of life, in the truth of impermanence. Trust begins with small steps. It begins with loosening the grip of thought. When the mind spirals into what if, we gently bring it back to what is. Right now, in this breath, are we safe? Right now, in this room, is there danger? More often than not, the answer is yes, we are safe. This practice reminds us that anxiety is a projection, not a reality. By grounding ourselves in the present, we weaken anxiety's hold. Breathing exercises can serve as anchors. One simple practice is to inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. This extended exhale activates the body's relaxation response, signaling safety to the nervous system. In moments of panic, this small act can be a lifeline. Over time, the breath becomes not just a tool, but a trusted friend, always available, always steady. Meditation also plays a vital role. Sitting in stillness, observing the rise and fall of thoughts, we learn that we do not have to chase every anxious idea. Thoughts come, thoughts go, like clouds drifting across the sky. We are not the clouds. We are the sky itself, vast, open, unshaken. This realization shifts everything. Anxiety may still visit, but it no longer defines the horizon. Compassion continues to be essential. Anxiety often convinces us that we are broken, that something is wrong with us. But anxiety is not a flaw. It is a signal. It is the body and mind trying to protect us, even if clumsily. When we treat anxiety with compassion, placing a hand on the heart, whispering, "I know you are scared, and I am here," we begin to soothe the fear rather than fight it. This gentle approach calms the nervous system far more effectively than harsh self-criticism ever could. Equanimity, too, becomes a powerful ally. Equanimity does not mean indifference. It means steadiness in the face of change. Anxiety thrives on the idea that we must avoid discomfort at all costs. Equanimity teaches us that discomfort is survivable. We can sit with fear, with unease, with uncertainty, and still remain whole. This realization weakens anxiety's power because the fear of fear often causes more suffering than fear itself. There are countless stories of people who found freedom not by eliminating anxiety, but by changing their relationship to it. One tells of a monk who was asked how he handled fear during nights in the forest. He replied, "I do not handle it. I let it be. I breathe with it. I sit with it, and eventually it passes." This simple wisdom is profound. We do not have to conquer anxiety. We only have to stop resisting it. Another story speaks of a man haunted by anxious thoughts every night. He fought them, cursed them, tried to force them away. One evening, exhausted, he decided to invite them in. "Come, fear," he said. "Sit with me." To his surprise, the thoughts began to fade. By opening the door instead of barring it, he discovered peace. Anxiety feeds on resistance. When welcomed with awareness, it loses its teeth. Modern science echoes these truths. Studies show that mindfulness reduces anxiety by calming the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Compassion practices lower stress hormones. Breathing exercises regulate the nervous system. What ancient teachings offered as spiritual practice, science now confirms as biological wisdom. The body and mind are not enemies. They are allies waiting to be guided with care. Still, the path is not linear. Anxiety may return, sometimes fiercely. In those moments, discouragement is natural. But here, the teaching of impermanence becomes a source of strength. Just as joy does not last forever, neither does fear. Each wave rises, each wave falls. Each moment is new. When we remember this, we stop demanding that anxiety disappear forever. We simply meet it as it comes, again and again, until it no longer terrifies us. Community can also be a source of healing. Sharing our struggles with trusted friends, teachers, or groups reminds us we are not alone. Anxiety often isolates, convincing us that no one else could understand. But countless others carry the same fears. Speaking them aloud dissolves shame and brings relief. In Buddhist tradition, the Sangha, the community of practitioners, is considered one of the 3 jewels of refuge. Together, people support one another, reminding each other of the path when the mind falters. At the heart of it all is the truth that anxiety, though painful, can become a teacher. It shows us where we cling to control. It reveals our fear of impermanence. It uncovers the illusions of the mind. And when faced with awareness, it invites us to grow in trust, compassion, and freedom. Imagine walking through a dark forest with only a small lantern. At first, the shadows terrify you. But as you walk slowly, carefully, you realize the path is not as dangerous as you feared. The lantern does not remove the darkness, but it gives enough light to keep going. Awareness is that lantern. Anxiety may not vanish, But with mindfulness and compassion, we have enough light to continue dot. And so, as part 4 draws to a close, we stand at another doorway. We have seen stress, money, relationships, and anxiety, 4 powerful forces that shape modern suffering. Each carries its own weight, yet each also carries the seed of transformation. Ahead lies the deeper exploration of our hidden selves, the shadows we push away, the parts of us we fear to face. These too hold wisdom, if we are willing to look with courage and compassion. This is where our journey takes us next. There are parts of ourselves we rarely show, parts we hide in the corners of our minds, parts we deny, parts we bury so deeply that even we forget they exist. These are the shadows of the self. They are the memories we do not want to revisit, the traits we feel ashamed of, the emotions we were told were unacceptable. For some, it is anger that erupts too quickly. For others, it is sadness that feels too heavy. For many, it is a quiet sense of not being enough, of being unworthy of love. These shadows remain with us, even when ignored. They seep into our choices, our relationships, and our sense of peace. The pain of the shadow self is subtle but profound. It shows up as unexplained anxiety, as a heaviness that lingers even when life appears stable. It shows up in quick reactions that surprise us, in words we regret but cannot take back. It shows up in the way we sabotage ourselves, pushing away opportunities, love or joy, because deep inside, a hidden voice insists we do not deserve them. These shadows, when unacknowledged, grow stronger. What we resist does not vanish. It festers. Modern culture does little to help. We are told to present only our best selves, to be polished, positive, successful. Social media amplifies this pressure, demanding constant smiles and curated perfection. But beneath the surface, people struggle. They scroll through endless images of happiness while quietly carrying shame, loneliness, and pain. The gap between the image and the reality grows wider, and the shadows grow darker. Yet these hidden parts are not enemies. They are fragments of ourselves, waiting to be seen with compassion. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not only from external conditions, but from the way we reject our own experience. When we deny anger, we suffer. When we suppress sadness, we suffer. When we hide fear, we suffer. But when we bring these shadows into the light of awareness, we begin to heal. A powerful practice in this regard is Tonglen, the meditation of giving and receiving. Instead of running from pain, Tonglen invites us to breathe it in with courage. We inhale the raw feeling of fear, shame, or sadness, and with the exhale, we offer compassion, space, and relief. This practice feels counterintuitive at first. Why breathe in suffering? But as we do, something remarkable happens. We realize we are vast enough to hold it. We realize that what once felt unbearable can be transformed into compassion, not only for ourselves, but for all beings who carry similar pain. Imagine inhaling the tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach, the heaviness in your heart. And then, as you exhale, sending out kindness to that part of yourself, as if speaking gently to a child. Over time, the shadows soften. They no longer need to scream for attention, because they are finally being seen. Stories from Buddhist tradition echo this truth. One tells of a meditator haunted by disturbing thoughts during practice. At first, he resisted, growing frustrated and ashamed. But a teacher reminded him, "Do not fight the shadows. Bow to them. They are your teachers." When the meditator began to welcome the thoughts with curiosity instead of fear, they lost their power. In their place arose a deeper peace. Another practice is simply naming the shadow when it appears. When anger rises, instead of saying, "I am angry," we say, "This is anger." When shame whispers, "You are unworthy," we respond, "This is shame." Naming creates distance. We are not the shadow. We are the awareness that sees it. This subtle shift transforms our identity. No longer defined by the shadow, we become the space in which all experiences come and go. Compassion is the key. Without compassion, facing the shadow can feel overwhelming. But compassion provides the warmth, the gentleness, the patience needed for healing. To place a hand on the heart and whisper, "I see you, I accept you, you belong," is a radical act. It is an act of reclaiming wholeness. Consider the story of a woman who spent years hiding her sensitivity. As a child, she was told she was too emotional, too soft. She learned to bury her feelings, to harden her heart. But in adulthood, this suppression turned into anxiety and disconnection. Through mindfulness, she slowly allowed her sensitivity to resurface. Instead of seeing it as weakness, she began to see it as strength, a source of empathy and depth. What once was shadow became gift. The Buddha taught that we all carry seeds of anger, fear, joy, compassion. The seeds we water are the ones that grow. When we water only rejection, the shadow thrives. When we water awareness and compassion, the shadow transforms into wisdom. This is not about erasing parts of ourselves. It is about integration. It is about holding the whole of who we are with kindness. As we explore the shadow self, we also begin to see others differently. We realize that everyone carries hidden pain. The person who lashes out in anger may be protecting a wound. The person who withdraws may be carrying shame. When we recognize our own shadows, we become less judgmental of others. We see their actions not as personal attacks, but as expressions of their own unacknowledged pain. This perspective deepens compassion and strengthens connection. The practice of shadow work is not easy. It requires courage to face what we have long denied. But it is also deeply liberating. For in the shadows lie not only pain, but potential. The anger we fear may contain the energy for justice. The sadness we hide may hold the key to compassion. The fear we avoid may reveal our deepest longing for safety and love. By embracing these parts, we reclaim the fullness of our humanity. And so, as we begin part 5, we step into the territory of the hidden, the unspoken, the parts of ourselves we have exiled. We do so not to dwell in darkness, but to bring light. Because only when we face the shadow can we discover the wholeness waiting beneath. The shadows we carry often appear in moments of vulnerability. A parent loses patience and yells at a child, then feels overwhelming guilt. A professional freezes during a presentation, convinced they are worthless. A friend cancels plans again, not because of rejection, but because depression makes leaving the house feel impossible. These moments expose what we try to hide: the fear of failure, the wound of inadequacy, the shame of imperfection. Instead of meeting these moments with kindness, many respond with self-criticism. I should be stronger. I should be better. I should not feel this way. The inner voice becomes a harsh judge, turning shadows into prisons. Yet judgment only deepens the suffering. The Buddha taught that aversion, pushing away what we dislike, fuels more pain. When we reject our anger, it grows. When we deny our sadness, it lingers. When we bury our fear, it shapes our choices from the dark. But when we turn toward these feelings with awareness, we discover that they are not monsters, but messengers. They carry truths about our needs, our wounds, and our humanity. Take anger, for example. Left unchecked, it can cause harm. But beneath anger often lies hurt or a cry for justice. To face the shadow of anger is to ask, what am I protecting? What pain is beneath this fire? In doing so, anger can transform into clarity, courage, and a force for positive change. Or consider shame. Shame whispers, "You are unworthy." It convinces us that if others saw our true selves, they would turn away. But when we bring shame into the light of compassion, we begin to see its illusion. We realize that worth is not something to be earned, it is inherent. The Buddha reminded his followers that each being carries the seed of awakening, the capacity for wisdom and compassion. Shame may cover this truth, but it cannot erase it. Fear, too, when faced directly, reveals wisdom. Fear shows us where we long for safety, where we crave love, where we resist impermanence. Instead of being paralyzed, we can bow to fear and say, "Thank you for reminding me of what I value." Fear then shifts from enemy to guide, pointing us toward what matters most. The practice of mindfulness gives us the tools to engage with these shadows. Sitting quietly, observing without judgment, we create space for the shadow to arise. We notice the tightness in the body, the stories in the mind, the waves of emotion. We breathe with them, allowing them to be present without pushing them away. In this spaciousness, the shadow loses its sharpness. It becomes simply another experience. Moving through the vast field of awareness, another practice is self-compassion. Psychologists today echo what Buddhism has long taught, that speaking to ourselves with kindness transforms suffering. Instead of saying, "I failed," we can say, "I am learning." Instead of, "I am broken," we can say, "I am human." Instead of, "I do not deserve love," we can say, "Like all beings, I long for love, and I am worthy of it." These gentle phrases do not erase pain instantly, but they begin to heal the deep wounds carried in the shadows. Stories illustrate these truths vividly. One tells of a monk who feared failure so deeply that he avoided responsibility. His teacher instructed him to sit in meditation each day and say aloud, "I allow myself to fail." At first, the words felt unbearable, but slowly he realized that failure was not the end. It was a teacher. It revealed where he clung to perfection, where he feared judgment, where he forgot his inherent worth. By embracing failure, his fear softened and his confidence grew. Another story speaks of a woman haunted by grief after losing her child. She begged the Buddha for medicine to heal her pain. He asked her to bring a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched every home, but in each she found sorrow. Returning empty-handed, she realized that suffering was universal. In that realization, her grief softened. Her shadow of loss became a doorway to compassion for all who suffer. Integration of the shadow does not mean we eliminate pain. It means we welcome it into the circle of our being. Imagine yourself as a host at a gathering. Each guest represents a part of you: joy, anger, fear, love, shame, compassion. For years, you locked certain guests outside, ashamed of them. But they never left. They waited at the door, knocking louder. Integration is the act of opening the door and saying, "You belong here too." When all guests are welcomed, the house becomes whole. This wholeness does not mean perfection. It means authenticity. It means living honestly with ourselves, no longer pretending to be only light while hiding our shadows. It means recognizing that the lotus, symbol of awakening, blooms from the mud. Without the mud, there is no lotus. Without our shadows, there is no growth. As we integrate our shadows, relationships also change. When we accept our own imperfections, we become gentler with others. We no longer demand perfection from partners, friends, or family. We see their shadows too, and instead of recoiling, we recognize shared humanity. This does not mean tolerating harm, but it means meeting flaws with understanding. This shift transforms conflict into compassion, judgment into connection. The Buddha once said, "As a mother cares for her only child, so should we care for all beings." This includes ourselves. The shadows we carry are like children we have neglected. They cry, they act out, they demand attention. When we turn toward them with the love of a mother, they soften, they heal, they integrate. And in that act, we discover a peace deeper than denial could ever offer. The path of shadow integration is ongoing. It is not a single revelation, but a daily practice. Each time anger rises, we breathe. Each time shame whispers, we respond with kindness. Each time fear tightens, we place a hand on the heart and say, I am here. Slowly, the shadows become less frightening. They become teachers, guiding us back to wholeness. As part 5 comes to a close, we see that the shadows we feared are not curses, but invitations. They invite us to face ourselves fully, to embrace the parts we once rejected, to discover that healing comes not from perfection, but from acceptance. And as we step forward, we will explore yet another layer of human suffering, the relentless drive of desire, the endless craving for more, the cycle that promises happiness but delivers dissatisfaction. This, too, holds both pain and the possibility of freedom. Desire is one of the most powerful forces in human life. It shapes decisions, drives ambition, and promises fulfillment. It whispers that happiness lies just beyond the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship. And for a fleeting moment, desire delivers. We buy the new phone, we receive the promotion, we fall in love, and joy floods in. But soon the shine fades. The phone becomes ordinary. The promotion brings new stress. The relationship faces challenges. And desire, restless and unsatisfied, points us to the next thing, the next goal, the next escape. This cycle of craving is endless. It is like drinking salt water to quench thirst. The more we consume, the thirstier we become. Modern culture thrives on this cycle, feeding it constantly. Advertisements tell us we are incomplete without the latest product. Social media displays curated lives of abundance, making us feel we lack what others have. Even entertainment, with its constant streaming of new shows, new music, new distractions, trains the mind to crave novelty without pause. We live in a world designed to keep desire burning. The Buddha saw this clearly over 2,500 years ago. He described craving tanha as the root of suffering, not because wanting is inherently wrong, but because clinging to desire traps us in dissatisfaction. We chase, we grasp, we cling, and in doing so, we miss the peace already available. Desire is not satisfied by fulfillment. It is satisfied only by release. That the pain of craving shows up in countless ways. A man works tirelessly for wealth, believing it will bring peace. Yet with each milestone, he feels emptier, wondering why happiness always slips away. A woman longs for love, convinced that once she finds the perfect partner, she will be whole. But each relationship, pressured by impossible expectations, collapses. A student dreams of success, imagining that achievement will erase insecurity. Yet with each success comes more pressure, more fear of failure. Desire promises freedom, but delivers chains. Even simple pleasures can become prisons when clung to. The joy of a delicious meal fades quickly, leaving a craving for more. The thrill of a vacation ends, replaced by longing for the next escape. The comfort of praise evaporates, replaced by hunger for more approval. Desire keeps us running, never resting, always searching. But what happens when the running stops? The Buddha's teachings point us to a radical truth. True happiness does not come from satisfying every craving, but from seeing through craving itself. This does not mean rejecting all pleasure or living in harsh denial. It means recognizing desire for what it is, a temporary wave of the mind, not the path to lasting peace. Mindfulness is the first step. When a craving arises, instead of rushing to satisfy it, we pause. We notice the urge in the body, the pull in the mind, the story that says, I need this to be happy. We breathe with it, allowing it to be present without acting on it. In that pause, craving loses some of its power. We discover that we can sit with desire without being controlled by it. Imagine craving as a fire. Each time we give in, we add fuel. The fire grows, demanding more. But when we stop feeding it, the fire begins to fade. At first, the flames roar, demanding attention. But with patience, they settle. Desire, left unfulfilled, eventually passes. In that passing, we glimpse a freedom deeper than any satisfaction craving could provide. Another practice is reflecting on impermanence. The object of desire, no matter how enticing, will not last. The new car will age, the new outfit will fade, the new romance will change. By remembering impermanence, we loosen the grip of craving. We see that chasing the temporary cannot bring lasting joy. Instead, we turn toward what is timeless awareness, compassion, presence. Contentment is also essential. Contentment does not mean stagnation. It means appreciating what is here instead of constantly reaching for what is not. It is the quiet joy of eating a simple meal with gratitude, of walking in nature without needing more, of resting in the breath without distraction. Contentment transforms ordinary moments into treasures. It shifts the focus from lack to abundance. Generosity, once again, is a profound antidote. Craving says, I must get. Generosity says, I can give. Each act of giving weakens the grip of desire. It reminds us that joy is found not in hoarding, but in sharing. Even a small gesture offering time, a smile, or a helping hand breaks the cycle of endless wanting. The heart expands and craving loses its hold. Consider the story of a king who built palaces, collected treasures, and surrounded himself with pleasures. Yet he was restless, never satisfied. One day, he met a monk who owned only a bowl and a robe, yet radiated peace. The king asked, "How can you be so content with so little?" The monk replied, "Because I do not crave more. My peace is not in possessions, but in freedom." The king realized that despite his wealth, he was the poorer of the two. Another story tells of a traveler who filled his bag with gold while crossing a desert. At first, he felt rich, but as the sun burned and the journey grew long, the gold became a burden. What once felt like wealth now threatened his survival. Desire often works the same way. What we cling to as treasure can become the very weight that drags us down. The path to freedom from craving is not about rejecting life's joys, but about enjoying them without clinging. To taste the sweetness of fruit without demanding it last forever. To love a person deeply without trying to possess them. To work with dedication without tying worth to success. This balanced approach, known as the middle path, allows us to live fully without being enslaved by desire. As we begin part 6, we see that craving is a universal human struggle, intensified by the modern world, but rooted in timeless truths. The Buddhist teachings do not deny desire, they illuminate it, showing us how to transform it from prison into teacher. In the next step of this journey, we will go deeper into how craving shapes daily life, how it fuels suffering, and how practices of mindfulness, generosity, and wisdom can lead us into a freedom that no craving can touch. Desire wears many disguises. Sometimes it looks like ambition, pushing us to achieve more, climb higher, reach farther. Sometimes it looks like comfort, pulling us toward food, entertainment, or distraction. Sometimes it looks like love, convincing us that happiness depends entirely on another person. And sometimes it looks like escape, urging us to numb pain with substances, shopping, or endless scrolling. On the surface, these cravings appear different, but beneath them all lies the same restlessness, the same hunger, the same longing for satisfaction that always slips through our fingers. Modern life magnifies these cravings in subtle ways. We live in a culture of instant gratification. With a single click, we can order a meal, buy a product, or stream entertainment. Technology trains the mind to expect speed, novelty, and abundance. But with each instant satisfaction, the craving for more grows. The brain learns not patience, but restlessness. This constant stimulation leaves little room for stillness, and stillness is where peace is found. Craving also thrives on comparison. A person may feel content with their life until they see someone else's highlight reel online. Suddenly, their own home, job, or relationship feels inadequate. The mind whispers, "If only I had what they have, I would be happy." But even when they achieve it, happiness fades and the cycle begins again. This endless comparison feeds dissatisfaction, making true contentment seem unreachable. The Buddha taught that craving is like a net, catching us in the cycle of samsara, the endless round of birth, death, and rebirth, or in modern terms, the endless repetition of desire and disappointment. Each craving promises escape from suffering, but instead, it weaves the net tighter. The more we chase, the more entangled we become. Yet freedom is possible. It begins with seeing craving clearly. Instead of being swept away, we pause and observe. What is this desire? Where does it arise in the body? What story does the mind attach to it? Perhaps it is a tightening in the chest, a rush of excitement, a thought that says, "I cannot be happy without this." By naming it, by seeing it, we weaken its hold. The desire is no longer an unconscious force. It is a passing event in awareness. This practice can be applied even in simple moments. Imagine craving a sweet treat. Instead of rushing to eat it, pause. Notice the salivation, the anticipation, the thoughts of pleasure. Breathe with it. You may still eat the treat, but the awareness changes the experience. The craving is no longer in control. You are. Sometimes you may find the craving fades without needing to be satisfied at all. This small victory plants seeds of freedom. Over time, mindfulness reveals the impermanence of craving. Each urge, no matter how strong, eventually passes. This truth can be deeply liberating. The next time a powerful desire arises, whether for food, validation, or success, you can remind yourself, this too will pass. Instead of feeling enslaved, you feel spacious. You discover that you are not at the mercy of craving. You are the vast awareness in which craving comes and goes. Generosity, again, is a direct antidote. Each time we give, we break the cycle of "I must have." We remind ourselves that happiness is found not in grasping, but in letting go. Even small acts, a smile, a kind word, a moment of patience chip away at the illusion that more possessions or more achievements are the key to joy. Generosity reveals that abundance is not measured by what we keep, but by what we share. The Buddha also spoke of the joy of renunciation. In modern times, renunciation may sound severe, like abandoning all comforts. But its essence is simple, choosing freedom over bondage. Renunciation means letting go of what no longer serves, of desires that harm rather than heal. It is the relief of cleaning a cluttered room, the peace of silencing constant notifications, the lightness of releasing the need to prove ourselves. Far from deprivation, renunciation is abundance. It is the abundance of peace, space, and clarity. Stories illustrate this truth. One tells of a rich man who collected jewels. Each day he worried about thieves, locking his treasures in boxes, sleeping restlessly. One day, a wise monk visited and said, "You think these jewels bring you wealth, but in truth, they make you poor. Your freedom is stolen by your fear." The man, reflecting deeply, gave away much of his collection. To his surprise, peace returned. He discovered that real wealth was not in possessions, but in freedom from worry. Another story tells of a farmer who loved mangoes. He planted many trees and dreamed of endless fruit. But when the mangoes ripened, he grew obsessed with protecting them. He fought off animals, worried about thieves, and slept poorly. Finally, exhausted, he cut down most of the trees, keeping only a few. With fewer mangoes, his joy returned. He realized that too much desire had robbed him of the very sweetness he sought. These stories remind us that craving is not defeated by excess, but by balance. The middle path, enjoying life's pleasures without clinging, pursuing goals without obsession, loving deeply without possession, brings a kind of happiness craving can never touch. Still, the path requires patience. Craving does not vanish overnight. It is a habit built over years, reinforced by culture, family, and mind. But each moment of awareness weakens it. Each act of generosity loosens its grip. Each breath of contentment waters the seed of peace. Slowly, the fire cools, the net loosens, the heart rests. And in that resting, a new kind of joy emerges, a joy not dependent on circumstances, possessions, or outcomes. A joy that is quiet, steady, and free. The Buddha called this sukha, the happiness of release. Unlike the fleeting thrill of desire fulfilled, sukha endures. It arises from letting go, from seeing clearly, from living in harmony with truth. As part 6 comes to a close, we recognize craving for what it is, a cycle that promises happiness but delivers suffering. We see how it shapes our lives, how it fuels dissatisfaction, and how Buddhist wisdom offers a way out, not by denying life, but by meeting it with balance, generosity, and clarity. Ahead, our journey turns to another universal challenge, the struggle with identity and ego. Beneath craving lies the question of who we think we are and who we fear we are not. The ego clings, compares, and defends, creating suffering even when all else seems well. To face this, we must explore the illusions of self and the freedom that comes when we let them go. Behind craving, behind attachment, behind so much of human suffering lies a deeper question. Who am I? This question drives us more than we realize. It shapes how we speak, how we act, how we relate to others. We build an identity, a self-image, and then spend our lives defending it. We say, "This is me. This is who I am." But the truth is, this me is fragile. It is built on shifting sand-on opinions, possessions, roles, and memories that change with time. And because it is fragile, it requires constant protection. This protection is what we call the ego. The ego is not evil. It is a function of the mind. It gives us a sense of continuity, a way to navigate the world. But when we cling to it too tightly, it becomes a source of suffering. The ego says, "I must be seen as successful." So when failure comes, it hurts deeply. The ego says, "I must be loved and admired." So when rejection comes, it feels unbearable. The ego says, "I am this role, this body, this identity." So when life changes, we panic. Modern culture strengthens the ego in subtle ways. Social media turns identity into performance. People curate images, words, and stories to present a self that will be liked, followed, and validated. Each like feels like affirmation of worth. Each absence of attention feels like rejection. Careers, too, become tied to identity. A person introduces themselves by what they do. "I am a lawyer, a teacher, a business owner." When the job is lost or retirement comes, they feel lost as well, unsure of who they are without the title. Even relationships become mirrors for the ego. "I am a spouse, a parent, a friend." When bonds shift or end, the ego feels shattered. The Buddha saw through this illusion of a fixed self. He taught anatta, the doctrine of non-self. This does not mean that we do not exist. It means that what we call self is not permanent, not independent, not solid. It is a collection of conditions: body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, consciousness. These come together for a time like ingredients in a recipe, but they are not fixed. They change moment to moment. To cling to them as me is to invite suffering. think of a river. From one perspective, it looks like a single entity. But in truth, it is never the same. The water flows constantly, always changing, always moving. The river is not a fixed thing, but a process. The self is the same. It appears solid, but in reality, it is a flow of experiences, never identical, never still. When we see this clearly, the need to cling softens. We realize we do not need to defend a fixed identity, because no such identity exists. The pain of ego shows up in everyday life. Someone criticizes us, and we feel attacked. Why? Because the ego clings to the image of being right, competent, or good. Someone else succeeds, and we feel jealous. Why? Because the ego compares, needing to be better, smarter, or richer. We make a mistake, and shame floods in. Why? Because the ego insists we must be perfect. In each case, suffering arises not from the event itself, but from the ego's demand to protect an image. Mindfulness helps us see this process in action. When hurt arises after criticism, we pause and ask, what am I protecting? Often, it is not truth, but image. When jealousy arises, we ask, what story am I telling about myself? Usually, it is the story that worth depends on comparison. When shame arises, we ask, who am I trying to be? The answer is often an impossible ideal. By seeing these patterns, we loosen their grip. Another practice is humility. Humility is not self-deprecation. It is not thinking less of ourselves. It is seeing clearly that we are part of a greater whole, no more and no less. Humility frees us from the exhausting need to constantly prove ourselves. It allows us to rest in the truth that we are already enough, without comparison or defense. Compassion also transforms the ego. When we shift focus from how am I seen to how can I serve, the ego softens. Acts of kindness, offered without expectation, dissolve the rigid boundaries of self. We realize that we are not separate from others, but deeply interconnected. The suffering of one affects all. The joy of one uplifts all. This recognition dissolves the illusion of a separate, fixed identity. Consider a story of two monks arguing about a flag blowing in the wind. One said, "The flag is moving." The other said, "The wind is moving." A teacher nearby said, "No, your minds are moving." This story reveals how the ego insists on fixed positions, needing to be right. But when we see beyond ego, we realize the truth is more spacious. The need to defend collapses, and peace enters. Another parable tells of a man carrying a heavy bag on his back. When offered rest, he refused, saying, "Without this bag, who would I be?" The bag represented his identity, his achievements, his possessions, his story. Yet it was also his burden. Only when he set it down did he discover freedom. The ego is this bag. We cling to it for identity, but it weighs us down. The Buddha did not teach the dissolution of self as a nihilistic void, but as liberation. When we no longer cling to a fixed identity, we become free to flow with life. We can adapt, grow, and respond without the constant pressure to defend me. This is not the loss of self, but the discovery of a greater self, one that is interconnected, fluid, and boundless. As we explore ego, we also uncover its role in conflict. Wars, arguments, divisions all often stem from clinging to identity. This is my nation, my belief, my way, my truth. When identities clash, suffering spreads. But when we see the illusion of fixed self, compassion grows. We realize that beneath labels and roles, we all share the same longing: to be happy, to be safe, to be free from suffering. This recognition transforms how we live. Instead of defending endlessly, we listen. Instead of comparing, we celebrate. Instead of grasping, we release. Slowly, the ego softens, and in its place grows peace. as Part 7 begins, we see that the self we defend so fiercely is not as solid as we think. The teachings of non-self invite us to loosen our grip, to stop carrying the heavy bag, to discover the freedom of flow. Ahead, we will explore even more deeply how the illusions of self create suffering, and how mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom can open the door to a freedom beyond ego. The ego whispers constantly. It says, protect yourself, defend your image, make sure others see your worth. And so we argue when criticized, boast when insecure, withdraw when threatened. Each of these reactions is an attempt to secure the fragile sense of self. But the harder we try to protect it, the more fragile it feels. Like a sandcastle built on the shore, the ego requires constant maintenance, and each wave of life threatens to wash it away. This fragility explains why even small events can trigger such strong emotions. A colleague receives praise, and suddenly we feel diminished. A friend forgets to call, and suddenly we feel unloved. A stranger insults us, and suddenly we feel shattered. None of these events truly harm us, yet the ego interprets them as attacks. It is like living with a thin, brittle shell, always afraid of being cracked. The Buddha invited us to question this shell. Who is this I we defend? Is it the body, which changes constantly, aging day by day? Is it the mind, with its endless thoughts that arise and vanish? Is it the personality, shifting with mood and circumstance? When we look closely, the solid self dissolves. What remains is not nothingness, but openness. We discover that the self is more like a wave on the ocean, unique in form, but inseparable from the sea. Seeing through the illusion of a fixed self is not easy. The ego resists, clinging tightly. But even brief glimpses can be liberating. In meditation, when the mind quiets, there are moments where the sense of I fades. There is just breath, just awareness, just being. In those moments, peace arises because there is no ego to defend, no story to maintain. The more we taste this, the more we see that freedom lies not in building a stronger self, but in loosening the grip of self altogether. Compassion plays a central role here as well. The ego thrives on separation, me versus you, us versus them. But compassion dissolves these boundaries. When we see another's suffering as our own, when we wish for their happiness as much as ours, the walls of ego weaken. We realize we are not isolated selves, but parts of an interconnected whole. The Buddha compared this to the body. If one hand is injured, the other hand helps without question, because both are part of the same body. In truth, all beings are part of the same body of life. To care for others is to care for ourselves. Humility also softens the ego. Humility is not humiliation. It is not thinking we are less. It is seeing clearly that we are not more. It is remembering that just as we have fears, others do too. Just as we make mistakes, others do too. Just as we long for love, others do too. Humility replaces arrogance with empathy, competition with cooperation, isolation with connection. The dangers of ego are seen clearly in the world. Nations clash, unwilling to let go of pride. Families fracture, unwilling to admit fault. Individuals suffer, unwilling to accept imperfection. Ego builds walls, but those walls become prisons. When we let go, when we say, I do not need to be superior, I do not need to be perfect, the walls crumble. Beyond them lies freedom, and beyond freedom lies peace. Stories illustrate these truths. One tells of a monk who is insulted repeatedly. His companion asked why he did not defend himself. The monk replied, if someone offers you a gift and you do not take it, to whom does the gift belong? The insults, like unwanted gifts, return to the giver. The monk's ego was not touched, so he remained free. Another story tells of a wise teacher asked how he remained humble despite great respect from others. He said, "When people praise me, I remember that their words are about their perception, not my essence. When they criticize me, I remember the same. I am neither the praise nor the blame. I am simply here." This wisdom reflects freedom from ego's grasp. The Buddha also spoke of the dangers of conceit, the belief that we are better, worse, or even equal to others in a rigid sense. All three are traps of comparison. True freedom comes not from ranking ourselves, but from recognizing the illusion of the self we compare. When the illusion fades, comparison fades, and peace grows, this does not mean we lose individuality. We still have personalities, talents, preferences, but we no longer mistake them for permanent identity. We wear them lightly, like clothes we can change, not chains that bind us. This lightness allows us to engage fully with life without being trapped by a dot. As ego softens, relationships transform. Arguments diminish because there is no need to always be right. Jealousy fades because another's success is no longer a threat. Loneliness dissolves because the boundary between self and other grows thin. Life becomes less about defending and more about sharing, and yet the journey continues. For even when ego loosens, another challenge arises: the subtle attachments to wisdom itself, to progress, to spiritual identity. A person may think, "I am advanced, I am awakened, I am special." Here, ego sneaks back in new disguise. The path requires constant humility, constant awareness, constant letting go. As part 7 comes to a close, we see that the self we defend so fiercely is not solid, but shifting. Ego promises safety, but delivers fear. Identity promises stability, but delivers fragility. The Buddha's teachings invite us to release the grip, to see through illusion, and to rest in a freedom beyond self. Ahead, our journey turns to a different kind of teaching, one found not in abstraction, but in simple stories. Stories of monks, of teacups, of daily life, carrying truths that pierce the heart more deeply than theories. These parables reveal wisdom in ways that words alone cannot. They invite us to see with new eyes, to open with new hearts. And so, we walk forward into part 8. There was once a monk who owned a simple porcelain teacup. It was not extravagant, not valuable, not something that would catch the eye of a collector. But to the monk, it was precious. He drank from it each morning, holding it with care, grateful for its usefulness. One day, a visitor asked him how he could be so content with such an ordinary object. The monk smiled and said, "To me, this cup is already broken." At first, the visitor was confused. The cup was intact, whole, unchipped. "Why call it broken?" The monk explained, "One day this cup will fall. One day it will crack or shatter. That is its nature. By remembering that it is already broken, I can appreciate it fully now. Each sip is a gift. Each moment with it is enough. When the day comes that it breaks, I will not mourn, because I have already loved it as if it were gone." This story is simple, yet it holds a deep truth. Everything we hold dear, possessions, relationships, even our own bodies, is already broken in the sense that it will one day pass. Nothing lasts forever. But by seeing this clearly, we do not fall into despair. Instead, we discover gratitude. Knowing that nothing lasts, we cherish everything more deeply. Each hug, each conversation, each sunrise becomes precious. This is the paradox of impermanence. By accepting loss, we find greater joy. The teaching of the broken teacup applies not only to objects, but to life itself. We cling so tightly to what we love, fearing its end. We resist change, trying to hold back time. But the more we cling, the more we suffer. When we release the illusion of permanence, we open ourselves to the beauty of each passing moment. The teacup reminds us that life is fragile, and in that fragility lies its wonder. Another story tells of a monk sweeping the temple courtyard. A young student watched and asked why the monk seemed so joyful doing such a simple chore. The monk replied, "When I sweep, I only sweep. I am not thinking of yesterday or tomorrow. I am not wishing for more. I am simply here with broom and ground. Each stroke is peace." The student frowned and said, "But I do not enjoy sweeping. It feels like work." The monk smiled again. "It is only work when you are elsewhere. When you are here, it is life." This story reveals the heart of mindfulness. We often rush through daily tasks, seeing them as obstacles to real living. We wash dishes while thinking of television. We drive while thinking of work. We eat while scrolling through our phones. We treat the present moment as a means to an end. But when we bring full awareness to each act, no matter how small, it becomes sacred. Sweeping is not just cleaning, it is meditation. Washing dishes is not just a chore, it is an opportunity for presence. Life is not found in grand events alone, but in the simple moments we often overlook. A third story tells of a farmer who came to the Buddha, complaining of his many problems. His crops sometimes failed, his family argued, his animals grew sick, his body aged. "Please, teacher," the farmer said, "help me remove all these problems." The Buddha listened and then replied, "I cannot help you with that. Everyone has 83 problems. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but always at least 83. When one goes away, another arises. If your crops are good, your health may decline. If your health is strong, your family may quarrel. No one escapes the 83 problems." The farmer grew angry. "Then what is the use of your teaching if you cannot solve my problems?" The Buddha said, "I can help you with the 84th problem." "And what is that?" the farmer asked. "The belief that you should not have any problems." This story strikes at the heart of human dissatisfaction. We suffer not only because of life's difficulties, but because we expect life to be free of them. We imagine happiness means the absence of all problems. But problems are part of being alive. When we accept this, a great weight lifts. We stop chasing perfection and begin living with peace, even amidst imperfection. These parables show that wisdom is not always found in complex philosophy. It is revealed in teacups, in sweeping, in farming. It is revealed in the ordinary moments of life. If we are willing to see still, parables do not only comfort, they also challenge. One story tells of a monk approached by a warrior. The warrior asked, "What is heaven and what is hell?" The monk replied harshly, "Why should I tell you? You are rude, clumsy, unworthy of such knowledge." The warrior, furious, drew his sword to strike. The monk calmly said, "This is hell." The warrior froze, realizing the truth. His rage, his blindness, his suffering, this was hell. Tears filled his eyes, and he put down his sword. The monk said, "And this is heaven." This story teaches that heaven and hell are not distant places. They are states of mind. Anger creates hell. Compassion creates heaven. In each moment, we hold the power to shift between them. This is a radical teaching because it places responsibility not in the hands of fate or gods, but in our own awareness. Another parable tells of a student asking a master about enlightenment. The student said, "I have studied scriptures, meditated for years, yet still I do not feel awakened. What more must I do?" The master asked, "Have you eaten your meal?" The student replied, "Yes." The master said, "Then wash your bowl." At first, the student was baffled, but then the truth dawned. Enlightenment is not hidden in distant practices or complex theories. It is found in the simple act of living fully, here and now. Eating with presence, washing with care, walking with awareness. These are not small acts. They are the very path to awakening. These stories remind us that wisdom is never far away. It does not require wealth, power, or special status. It is available in each breath, each act, each moment of presence. But to see it, we must pause. We must listen. We must open our eyes to the lessons of everyday life. As Part 8 begins, we are invited into the world of stories. Stories that touch the heart more deeply than theory, that slip past the intellect and reach the soul. Stories that remind us that the path to peace is not somewhere else. It is here, in teacups, in sweeping, in bowls. Ahead, we will continue with more parables, each carrying a seed of truth, each pointing us gently toward the freedom that lies within. One day, a student asked his teacher, "What is the essence of your teaching?" The teacher replied, "Attention." The student, unsatisfied, pressed further. "And what else?" The teacher said again, "Attention." Frustrated, the student asked a third time, "But surely there must be more?" The teacher looked at him kindly and said, "Attention, attention, attention." This story may seem too simple, yet it points directly to the heart of practice. Attention is the doorway to all wisdom. Without attention, we miss life. Without attention, we are lost in past regrets and future fears. With attention, we touch reality as it is. With attention, we discover clarity and peace. Attention turns an ordinary breath into meditation, an ordinary meal into gratitude, an ordinary step into freedom. That another story tells of a man searching for happiness. He traveled far and wide, consulted teachers, studied scriptures, and practiced rituals. Still, he felt restless. Finally, exhausted, he collapsed beneath a tree. In the stillness, he noticed the sound of the wind in the leaves, the warmth of the sun, the rhythm of his breath. In that moment, he realized that what he sought was never far away. Happiness was not hidden in distant places. It was always here, waiting for his awareness. The Buddha often used simple images to teach profound truths. He compared the mind to a garden. If we plant seeds of anger, jealousy, and greed, those will grow. If we plant seeds of compassion, mindfulness, and generosity, those will flourish instead. Each thought, each act is a seed. The question is not whether we are planting, but what we are planting. This teaching reminds us that our lives are shaped not by fate alone, but by the choices we make each moment. There is also the story of the poisoned arrow. A man was struck by an arrow dipped in poison. Instead of removing it, he demanded answers. Who shot this arrow? What is his caste? What is his family name? What kind of bow did he use? The Buddha explained that before these questions could be answered, the man would die from the poison. In the same way, we often waste energy on endless speculation instead of addressing the urgent work of relieving suffering. The teaching is clear. Tend to the wound first. Seek liberation now, not after every question is answered. Another parable tells of a monk crossing a river. He built a raft of wood and reeds to carry him across. Once on the other side, he wondered if he should carry the raft further. The Buddha explained that the raft was useful for crossing, but once the river was crossed, it should be set down. In the same way, teachings are tools, not burdens. They guide us to freedom, but once freedom is reached, we do not cling to the tool. We live freely, without attachment even to the path itself. A favorite story tells of a woman who came to the Buddha, grieving the loss of her child. Her sorrow consumed her, and she begged for a cure. The Buddha told her to bring a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched every home, but in each she found grief. At last she returned, realizing that suffering is universal. Her personal grief transformed into compassion for all who suffer. The teaching here is profound. Pain is part of life, but through awareness, it can deepen our compassion instead of hardening our hearts. Stories like these continue to echo because they speak to universal human struggles. They do not lecture. They illuminate. They point to truths that we already sense, but often forget. They invite us to see life with new eyes. Another tale speaks of a monk who meditated by a river. Each day, he watched leaves and branches float downstream. One day, he saw a scorpion struggling in the water. He reached to save it, but the scorpion stung him. Despite the pain, he tried again, and again it stung him. A passerby asked, "Why do you keep trying to save that creature when it only hurts you?" The monk replied, "The scorpion's nature is to sting. My nature is to help. Should I give up my nature because of his?" This story reminds us that compassion is not conditional. It does not depend on others' behavior. It flows from who we are, not from what others do. Compassion is our true nature, waiting to be expressed. Another story tells of a master who poured tea into a student's cup. He poured until the cup overflowed, spilling everywhere. The student protested, "The cup is full." The master replied, "Like this cup, your mind is full of opinions, judgments, and ideas. How can I teach you unless you empty it?" This story warns against arrogance and invites openness. To learn, to grow, to awaken, we must first create space. These parables weave together a tapestry of wisdom. They show us that impermanence makes life precious, that mindfulness makes life rich, that compassion makes life whole. They show us that suffering is shared, that freedom is possible, that the path is walked not in theory, but in daily acts. As Part 8 concludes, we carry with us the images of teacups, brooms, rafts, rivers, mustard seeds, and overflowing cups. These are not just stories to be remembered, but practices to be lived. They invite us to see impermanence with gratitude, to approach each task with mindfulness, to face suffering with compassion, to hold teachings lightly, and to empty ourselves so wisdom may enter. And yet the journey does not stop here. Beyond stories and parables lies another shadow of modern life: loneliness. Even in crowded cities, even surrounded by people, many feel isolated, disconnected, unseen. Loneliness is one of the deepest pains of our time. In Part 9, we will turn to this suffering and discover how the Buddha's teachings of connection, compassion, and community can bring light to even the loneliest heart. Loneliness is one of the quietest yet heaviest burdens of modern life. It is not always about being alone. One can feel lonely in a crowded room, in a marriage, even within a family. Loneliness is the feeling of being unseen, unheard, disconnected from others, and even from oneself. It is the sense that no one truly understands, that we are walking through life in isolation. And though it may not always scream like stress or burn like anger, loneliness slowly erodes the spirit, leaving many feeling empty, hopeless, or invisible. In today's world, loneliness is more widespread than ever. Paradoxically, we are more connected than at any other time in history. With a single device, we can reach across the globe, see faces on screens, send messages instantly. Yet many confess to feeling more alone than ever. Social media, instead of bridging the gap, often deepens it. People compare their private struggles to the polished images of others, and instead of connection, they feel inadequacy. Workplaces, busy and demanding, leave little time for genuine bonds. Families, scattered by geography or fractured by conflict, sometimes drift apart. Amid all this, loneliness grows silently, like a shadow. The pain of loneliness touches every part of life. It weakens the body, as studies show increased risks of illness. It clouds the mind, feeding anxiety and depression. It deepens suffering, because pain shared is halved, but pain carried alone becomes heavier. Loneliness whispers dangerous lies. You are unworthy. You are forgotten. You do not matter. And when these lies are believed, they sink deeply into the heart, shaping choices, behaviors, and self-worth. The Buddha did not ignore loneliness. He saw clearly that while suffering is part of the human condition, so too is connection. He spoke of interbeing the truth that nothing exists independently. Just as a tree depends on sunlight, soil, and water, we depend on countless conditions for life. We are never truly alone, even when we feel it. Each breath connects us to the trees that give oxygen. Each meal connects us to farmers, cooks, and the earth itself. Each smile connects us to another human heart. When loneliness says, "You are separate," wisdom replies, "You are connected in ways beyond measure." Still, knowing this intellectually is not always enough. The heart longs for lived connection, for companionship, for the warmth of being understood. This is where the Sangha, or community, becomes essential. The Buddha emphasized that the path is not walked alone. Even he awakened, surrounded himself with companions. Together they practiced, supported, encouraged. Community is not an accessory to the path. It is part of the path. To sit in silence with others, to share meals, to listen and be listened, these simple acts restore a sense of belonging that loneliness steals. Also plays a role in healing loneliness. Often, when we feel isolated, the mind magnifies the pain. It spins stories. No one cares. I will always be alone. This will never change. These thoughts, repeated, create despair. Mindfulness interrupts the cycle. It invites us to return to the present moment, to notice that while loneliness is here, so is the breath. So is the body resting on the earth. So are sounds, sensations, life. Loneliness may still whisper, but awareness reveals it as one experience among many, not the whole truth of who we are. Another antidote to loneliness is compassion in action. When we feel isolated, turning outward to help others may seem counterintuitive, but it opens the heart. Volunteering, offering a kind word, listening deeply, these acts remind us of our capacity to connect. They shift the focus from absence to presence, from lack to contribution. Compassion does not erase loneliness instantly, but it builds bridges, one act at a time. Stories illuminate these truths. One tells of a man who felt abandoned by life. He lived in a village but kept to himself, convinced no one cared. One day, during a storm, he saw his neighbor struggling to keep her roof from collapsing. Without thinking, he rushed to help. As they worked side by side, something shifted. He realized that connection was not about waiting to be seen. It was about showing up. From then on, he began to engage, to help, to share. Slowly, the loneliness lifted. Another story speaks of a monk who felt isolated in his practice. Surrounded by others, he still felt alone. One day, his teacher asked him to sit quietly and imagine all beings around the world, those in joy, those in sorrow, those in loneliness like his own. As he did, tears came. He realized that his loneliness connected him to millions of others. He was not separate, but part of a vast web of beings longing for love. In that moment, his loneliness transformed into compassion. The teaching of impermanence also brings comfort. Loneliness feels permanent when we are in its grip. It feels like it will never end. But like all emotions, it rises and falls. The storm may be long, but it will pass. By remembering impermanence, we find strength to endure. By holding loneliness lightly, we discover that new connections, new moments of belonging, are always possible. As Part 9 begins, we face the reality of loneliness not with denial, but with honesty. We acknowledge its weight, its pain, its lies. But we also open to the truth that connection is always possible. Through community, through compassion, through mindfulness, through the simple awareness that we are never as separate as we think. Ahead, we will go deeper, exploring more practices and more wisdom to transform loneliness into connection, isolation into belonging, despair into hope. Loneliness often convinces us that we are the only ones who feel this way. It isolates us not only from others, but also from truth. In reality, loneliness is a universal experience. Across cultures, across generations, people have carried the same longing to be seen, to be loved, to belong. When we remember this, loneliness shifts. It becomes not a wall separating us, but a bridge connecting us to the human family. The Buddha often spoke of loving kindness, or metta, as medicine for isolation. Metta begins with ourselves, with the simple act of wishing well. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I live with ease. For those who feel unworthy of love, even this can feel impossible. But with patience, the words soften the heart. From there, we extend the same wishes outward, asterisk, to a loved one, to a neutral person, to a difficult person, and eventually to all beings. This practice dissolves barriers. It reminds us that though we may feel separate, we are bound together by the same wish, to be free from suffering, to live in peace. When practiced regularly, loving kindness transforms how we relate to others. A stranger on the bus is no longer just another face. They are someone's child, someone's friend, someone longing for happiness just as we are. This perspective breaks through loneliness. It shows us that beneath differences, there is deep sameness. Another practice is mindful communication. In loneliness, we often hide behind walls of silence, afraid to reach out. But connection grows through honest speech and deep listening. To listen without judgment, without preparing a reply, is a gift. To speak truthfully, without pretending or performing, is another. In Buddhist practice, right speech means speaking with kindness, honesty, and purpose. When conversations are rooted in presence and care, even brief encounters nourish connection. Community, again, is essential. A sangha does not need to be large or formal. It can be a group of friends who gather to meditate, a family who shares meals mindfully, or even two people who support each other in practice. The power of community is not in numbers, but in intention. To know that others walk the path beside us, to share joys and struggles, is to remember that we are not alone. Stories from the tradition emphasize this truth. One tells of a monk who considered leaving the community to practice alone. He felt disconnected and discouraged. His teacher asked him to bring a burning coal from the fire. When the coal was placed alone on the ground, it quickly went out. But when placed back among the other coals, it burned brightly again. The teacher said, "You are like this coal. Alone, your fire fades. Together, your fire is sustained." The monk stayed, and in community, his practice deepened. Another story tells of a woman who lost her husband and felt utterly alone. She visited the Buddha, who invited her to light a lamp and place it among many others. Watching her single lamp burn alongside hundreds, she realized her grief was part of the shared human experience. Her sorrow remained, but her loneliness softened. She was not carrying her burden alone. Loneliness also lessens when we reconnect with ourselves. Sometimes we feel alone because we are estranged from our own hearts. We avoid our feelings, distract ourselves, judge ourselves harshly. Mindfulness brings us back. To sit quietly, to breathe, to place a hand on the heart and say, "I am here," is a profound act of belonging. When we befriend ourselves, loneliness loosens its grip. Compassion for others also transforms loneliness into purpose. There are always those in greater need, those who are sick, hungry, grieving. When we turn outward to serve, we discover that giving heals both receiver and giver. Acts of service remind us of our interconnectedness. They shift focus from what we lack to what we can offer. Even small acts, a kind word, a gesture of help, become threads, weaving us back into the fabric of life Impermanence remains a steady companion in this reflection. Loneliness feels endless, but like all states, it changes. The mind may insist this will always be so, but wisdom knows otherwise. Circumstances shift, people enter our lives, the heart grows. By trusting impermanence, we endure loneliness with patience, knowing it too will pass. The ultimate teaching on loneliness is interbeing. Nothing exists alone. A flower is made of soil, rain, sunlight, and countless conditions. In the same way, each of us is made of parents, teachers, friends, culture, earth, and sky. To say, "I am alone," is to forget this web of connection. Each breath ties us to trees. Each heartbeat ties us to ancestors. Each step ties us to the ground that supports us. When we see this truth, loneliness fades into belonging. As part 9 comes to a close, we recognize loneliness for what it is, a painful illusion of separation. It tells us we are isolated, but the Buddhist teachings reveal the opposite. We are never truly alone. We are connected to each other, to the earth, to the vast web of life. Healing begins when we remember this truth, when we open to compassion, when we join hands with others on the path. Ahead, our journey turns to the final great challenge of modern life, the fear of death. Beneath stress, craving, ego, and loneliness lies the ultimate uncertainty, the end of life itself. Death is often avoided, denied, hidden away. Yet the Buddha taught that by facing death directly, we discover the deepest peace. In part 10, we will walk into this territory, not with fear, but with courage, compassion, and the promise of liberation. Death is the great silence that hovers over every life. It is the reality most people avoid, the subject often pushed aside in conversation, hidden in hospitals, softened with euphemisms. Yet beneath our daily struggles, stress, money, relationships, loneliness, lies this deeper fear, the fear of the end. We may not think about it often, but it shapes how we live. It hides in the urgency to succeed quickly, in the desperation to hold on to youth, in the panic when illness strikes. It whispers, "Time is short. You will lose everything." And for many, that whisper becomes a roar. Modern society offers few tools for facing death honestly. Instead, it promises distractions. We are told to stay young, stay busy, stay entertained, as if by avoiding the subject, we can avoid the reality. Funerals are shortened, grief is hurried, and conversations about dying are considered morbid. But silence does not erase fear. In fact, avoiding death often makes it more terrifying, like a shadow growing larger because no one dares to look directly at it. The Buddha did not turn away from death. In fact, his entire teaching begins with the truth of impermanence, that all things arise, all things pass, and nothing lasts forever. He invited his followers to meditate on death, not to cultivate despair, but to awaken clarity. To remember death is to remember what matters. To face death is to be free from its grip. One practice is maranasati, mindfulness of death. In this meditation, practitioners reflect that death can come at any time, in any place, without warning. At first, this may sound frightening, but over time, it brings peace. When we accept that death is certain and its time uncertain, we stop postponing life. We live more fully now, because now is all we truly have. The story of the Buddha's own awakening begins with death. As a young prince, he was sheltered from all signs of suffering. But one day, he saw an old man, then a sick man, then a corpse. These sights shook him deeply. He realized that no wealth, no power, no privilege could protect him from aging, illness, and death. Instead of denying this truth, he sought to understand it. And in that search, he discovered the path to liberation. The pain of death lies not only in the event itself, but in our clinging. We cling to life, to loved ones, to possessions, to identity. The thought of losing them feels unbearable. Yet the Buddha taught that clinging creates suffering, while letting go brings peace. This does not mean we stop loving or caring. It means we love fully while remembering impermanence. We hold gently, not desperately. We appreciate deeply, knowing nothing can be held forever. Parables reveal this wisdom. One tells of a mother whose only son died. She was inconsolable, wandering in grief. She came to the Buddha, begging him to bring the child back. He told her to bring a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched, but in every home she found sorrow. At last she understood. Death touches all. Her grief softened, transformed into compassion for others who suffer the same loss. Another story speaks of a king who feared death above all else. He built palaces, collected treasures, and surrounded himself with pleasures to distract from the thought. But still fear haunted him. Finally, a teacher told him, "You cannot escape death, but you can learn to die before dying. Die to your attachments, die to your illusions, die to the false self. Then when death comes, it will find nothing to take." The king realized that freedom was not in avoiding death, but in letting go. For many, the fear of death is rooted in the fear of non-existence. If I die, will I vanish into nothing? Will I cease to be? The Buddha answered not with dogma, but with the truth of interbeing. Just as a flame, when extinguished, does not disappear, but transforms into heat and smoke, so too does life transform. Our bodies return to the earth. Our actions ripple through others. Our love, our kindness, our influence live on. Nothing is truly lost. It only changes form. Consider the ocean and the wave. The wave rises, dances, and falls. From one view, the wave begins and ends. But from another view, the wave is always water, inseparable from the ocean. Death is like the falling of the wave. The form changes, but the essence continues. This does not erase grief, but it softens fear. Facing death also deepens gratitude. When we remember that life is temporary, each moment shines brighter. A meal is not just food. It is a gift of earth and time. A conversation is not just words. It is a fleeting exchange never to be repeated. A hug, a laugh, a sunrise each become sacred when we remember they will not last. Death is the great teacher of presence. Asterisk still, grief is real. To lose someone we love is to feel the tearing of the heart. The Buddha did not deny grief. He did not demand people suppress it. Instead, he encouraged them to feel it fully, with mindfulness and compassion. Grief honors love. It is the measure of our connection. Over time, with awareness, grief can transform from sharp pain into quiet gratitude for what was shared. As Part 10 begins, we face death not as an enemy, but as a truth. We see how denial deepens fear, how clinging creates suffering, and how awareness brings peace. We learn from parables and practices that death, when faced directly, teaches us how to live. Ahead, we will go deeper, exploring not only how to accept death, but how to live in such a way that when the end comes, we meet it with peace, not fear. When we speak of death, we are really speaking of life. To ignore death is to live half asleep, avoiding the reality that gives each moment its urgency and its beauty. To face death directly is to awaken, to live more fully, to recognize what matters most. The Buddha urged his disciples to reflect daily. This may be my last day. This may be my last breath. Far from morbid, this reflection brings clarity. If this were truly our last day, how would we spend it? Likely not chasing possessions or arguing over pride. Likely not scrolling endlessly or clinging to grudges. We would love more openly, forgive more quickly, savor more deeply. Death teaches us to live. The fear of death often comes from unfinished living. People regret not expressing love, not pursuing truth, not releasing resentment. The practice of mindfulness invites us to live without postponement. Each act of kindness, each moment of presence, each breath of gratitude becomes a way of preparing for death, not by avoiding it, but by meeting it with a heart at peace. One story tells of a monk who meditated daily in a cemetery. When asked why, he said, "The bodies remind me of impermanence. They remind me to live without delay, to practice without distraction. Each day could be my last, and so each day is precious." His words reveal that awareness of death is not a burden, but a gift. It sharpens the mind, softens the heart, and keeps us awake to life. Another parable tells of two arrows. The first arrow is inevitable: sickness, aging, death. These come to all. But the second arrow is optional. The suffering we add by resisting, by saying, "This should not happen." When illness comes, the first arrow pierces. But when we add fear, anger, or despair, the second arrow wounds us further. By accepting the first arrow and refusing the second, we ease our pain. In the context of death, this means facing it as part of life, not as an enemy to be hated. For those who lose loved ones, grief can feel overwhelming. The Buddha taught that grief is the flip side of love. To love deeply is to grieve deeply when separation comes. But through mindfulness, grief can be held with compassion. We can place a hand on the heart, breathe with the ache, and say, "This is love transformed." In this way, grief becomes not a crushing weight, but a path to deeper compassion for all who suffer loss. There is also the teaching of legacy. While death ends a life, it does not end the influence of that life. Each act of kindness ripples outward, touching countless others. Each word, each gesture, each choice continues. In this sense, no one is ever truly gone. They live on in the lives they touched, in the hearts they changed, in the seeds they planted. Remembering this softens the finality of death. A beautiful metaphor compares life to a candle flame. One flame lights another and another until countless candles burn. The original flame may go out, but its light continues. In the same way, our lives pass, but our influence endures. This perspective shifts the fear of disappearance into an appreciation of continuity. Meditation on death can also dissolve the fear of small losses. We fear not only the final death, but the little deaths of daily life, the loss of youth, of status, of roles, of relationships. Each ending feels painful because we cling. But by practicing release with small losses, we prepare for the great release. We learn to say, "This too has passed," and in that acceptance, we find peace. The Buddha spoke of nirvana as the end of suffering, the extinguishing of the fire of craving and fear. In relation to death, nirvana is not annihilation, but liberation. It is the peace of no longer clinging to life, no longer fearing death, no longer bound by illusion. To taste nirvana, even briefly, is to realize that what we are is larger than birth and death. We are awareness itself, vast and boundless, untouched by beginnings and endings. One final story tells of a teacher asked what happens after death. He held up a lantern and blew out the flame. Then he asked, "Where did it go?" The students were silent. The teacher said, "Do not waste your life speculating where the flame went. Instead, live in such a way that when the flame goes out, you are ready." This story reminds us that the focus is not on what lies beyond, but on how we live now. If we live with compassion, mindfulness, and love, death holds no terror. As Part 10 concludes, we recognize death not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It reminds us of impermanence. It urges us to live fully. It softens our clinging. It deepens our compassion. To face death is to face life honestly. To accept death is to live without fear. And so, the path we have walked from stress to craving, from ego to shadow, from loneliness to death, comes full circle. Each suffering we explored is transformed by awareness, compassion, and wisdom. Ahead lies the final step, the conclusion. In this closing reflection, we will gather the threads of the journey, affirm the hope that runs through every teaching, and invite the listener to carry these truths into their own lives with courage and grace. We have walked a long road together. From the restless grip of stress to the ache of money struggles, from the heartbreak of relationships to the quiet weight of anxiety, from the hidden shadows of the self to the endless cycle of craving, from the fragile walls of ego to the simple parables of daily life, from the silent pain of loneliness to the ultimate truth of death. At each step, we have seen how suffering is real, how it touches every life, how it cannot be escaped by denial or distraction. Yet at each step, we have also discovered that suffering is not the end of the story. Within every pain lies the seed of freedom. Within every struggle lies the doorway to peace. The Buddhist teachings do not promise a life without challenges. They do not remove loss, change, or endings. What they offer is more profound, the ability to face life as it is, with clarity, compassion, and courage. They invite us to meet stress with breath, money with balance, relationships with love, anxiety with awareness. They teach us to embrace the shadow, release craving, soften the ego, and learn from simple stories. They remind us that loneliness can be transformed through connection, and that even death itself can be faced with peace. The thread that runs through all of this is presence. To be here, fully, without running, without clinging, without hiding. Presence turns suffering into teacher, turns fear into wisdom, turns life into practice. Presence allows us to touch each moment deeply, to live without postponement, to die without regret. This journey has not been about ideas alone. It has been about practice breathing, noticing, letting go, loving, connecting, living mindfully. These are not abstract philosophies. They are actions anyone can take. Each small step changes the heart. Each act of awareness builds freedom. Each act of compassion builds connection. Slowly, the weight lifts, the heart opens, and life feels lighter, clearer, more whole. And so, as we conclude, let us remember, peace is not distant. Freedom is not reserved for the few. Wisdom is not hidden in temples or texts alone. They are here, in each breath, in each act, in each moment of kindness. The path is not somewhere else. The path is life itself. May you carry these truths into your days. May you remember, when stress arises, that the breath is always near. May you remember, when craving burns, that contentment is possible. May you remember, when loneliness whispers, that you are never truly alone. May you remember, when death approaches, that life has already been a gift. And above all, may you walk gently, with compassion for yourself and for others. For in compassion, all divisions dissolve. In compassion, we remember that we are one body, one family, one great web of life. The journey of these 40,000 words has been long, but in truth, it has only been a beginning. The real journey begins now with your next breath, your next step, your next act of presence. May it be a journey of peace. May it be a journey of freedom. May it be a journey of love.